Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Next to me on my, oh yeah, I got it right this time. On my, I think if you're watching it, it's probably on my right. On my right, oh shit, like this. On my right,
That's the one.
I, yeah, that's the one. I got an amazing vegan activist. I don't know if you know him. I mean, and he's not that well known, right? I mean, he's just one of the most non-vegan activists I've ever seen. Like Jack Higgs, an amazing. Oh, damn, I keep getting it wrong. An amazing vegan activist. Welcome, Jack.
Oh, thanks
Yeah,
for having me, man. I'm glad to be here.
I'm a bit nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. Just a nice conversation. I'm really actually glad you've invited me on.
Me too. I'm glad you accepted.
Cool.
It's nice to see. You know, by the way, I don't know if you remember, we met in Amsterdam. Do you remember?
Yeah, of course I remember. Yeah, I loved it in Amsterdam. We were there for about a week, and we did a couple outreach days with you guys. Or was it just one day? I can't remember now.
I think
I
we
think it
met
was one
at
day.
AV. Yeah, and we did one day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed it there. Great
yeah.
place. And
I
you
saw
have a
you
really
posted
nice
a.
community too.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true. It's AV has a good community. Well, lately it's been, but it's still a
Well,
good
it
community. Yeah,
depends
still a good
where, and
community.
there's always going to be the odd people that stand out that are not so nice. But in general, in Europe, I had a really good experience, in Amsterdam definitely stood out to us.
Oh, nice, nice. Are you ever thinking of moving to Europe?
um, I don't think. I think it would just be such a big change for us. We love it here in Australia, specifically in Perth. Um, it's a very laid back city here. So yes, we're quite recognized here, especially Tash, but it kind of works in our favor when we go out and do videos. But we really loved it in Europe. We loved it in the UK. If we were to move to the Northern Hemisphere, it would probably be to the UK, and then we'd probably go back and forth to the Europe. That would be pretty awesome. I would love to do that for like a good year or two, but I don't
Yeah.
know if I'd move there to live. I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Interesting that you called it the Northern Hemisphere. I never thought about it that way. I always just saw it. Yeah, because you're right. We are in different hemispheres, but we always
Yeah, you're
just,
very far away.
yeah, very far away indeed. Very far away. Actually, I think when I remember when I was young, I lived in Romania and I searched where is the furthest away I can go and live from Romania because I just didn't like it. And well, it was, I don't know, maybe 800 kilometers away from Australia. So maybe Australia was probably the
Could have been New
furthest away.
Zealand, maybe.
It passed New Zealand even. It passed New Zealand. So
Oh, right. Yeah. There you go.
yeah, so
Wow. Yeah,
somewhere there.
we're pretty far away from everybody. It kind of sucks because we made such good friends when we were in the UK and Europe, and like we felt so motivated to get out and do activism with such a kind of such a like so many powerful communities, and they're so close together. Because here in Perth, I think it's said that Perth is the most isolated city from any other city in the world. So we have to fly like across the country to even go and be with another type of activist community, let alone flying over 20 hours to get to the UK and Europe. Like it kind of sucks, but it is what it is.
I was gonna ask you, like, how far away is New Zealand? Like, because you know, when you look on the map, when I think, oh, I'm in Australia, I'm like, oh, I'm right next to New Zealand. What is it? It's a 1 hour flight, but I think it's more than that, isn't it?
If you're on the East Coast, so if you're in Sydney, Melbourne, or any city on the East Coast, yeah, it's probably an hour or 2 hours. I'm not too sure. For me, it's probably 6 hours flight. It's literally across the country. I don't know how many kilometers that is. It's probably like God, maybe 6,000 kilometers. I'm not entirely sure on that, but yeah, it's still fairly far for me anyway.
That's insane. You know, it's 6 hours
Yeah,
between Amsterdam and New York, and I'm like, okay, wow,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
I
That puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
it does, it does. It's like, because when you again when you look on the map, or like, or at least to, to the geographically not so good. I don't know. I was searching for a word there for the geographically challenged people
Yes.
such as myself. Man, that's
Yes,
a
yes,
hard
yeah.
word to say.
Yeah.
Geographically. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. I have a couple of questions for you, but first I saw that somebody gifted some membership, so I'm just gonna say thank you, Mike, and thank you, Ali. Awesome people. I'm sure they follow you, and they are amazing supporters as always. Okay. Well, I have a couple of standard questions. I think we can go through these a bit fast and then just go into the thick of it. I mean, it starts with how long have you been vegan, and what is the argument that made you switch to veganism, if there even was one, right? Because for me, there was an aha moment when I'm like, oh, okay, I got to be vegan now. There's no reason. So I'm curious if
Yes.
you had this moment, and how did it happen? All that.
Yeah. For me, it was 7 years ago. Maybe almost 7 years. I'm not entirely sure there. I don't actually remember the exact day. So for me, I was in high school still. I would have been early year 12 when I went vegan. So that was 2017. And so it actually was my sister. She's 4 years younger than me. She came home from school maybe a year prior to me going vegan, and she said she was going vegan. She was only like 11 or maybe 12 or 11 at the time, and I'd never really thought about it before. It's not really something that I just don't even know if maybe I knew about vegetarianism. Oh, I definitely did because my mum was vegetarian. But the idea of veganism seemed far more extreme to me if I had even considered it. So then, yeah, she came home and she was going vegan, and she's been vegan ever since. She convinced my mum, maybe a few months in, to go vegan as well from vegetarian. And then my mum actually got me to watch some documentaries such as What the Health, Cowspiracy, which aren't ethical documentaries, but it definitely got me thinking about veganism. And then she actually got me to watch a James Aspey speech on YouTube. I can't remember exactly which one it was. Oh no, I do know. I think it's one where he has some like red curtains behind him. It seems like I would know it if I watched it again today. And he really convinced me. I think it was seeing the environmental impact, the health impact, and then him kind of putting it in a way that does talk about ethics very specifically. And I was just like, it's a no-brainer now, because actually this reminds me, when I was maybe 10 or 11 myself, or potentially even younger, I think I was just scrolling through Facebook. And yes, it's weird that I was on Facebook at that age, but I was scrolling through it, and some clips of Earthlings came up. I didn't know it was Earthlings, but it was just slaughterhouse footage. And it disturbed me, like really, really disturbed me. I was like, fuck, like that's horrible, horrible, horrible. And I knew it was wrong, and I knew that was me eating meat, but I thought that I had to. So I continued to tell myself that this is like a necessary evil that I have to take part in. So then learning and kind of seeing all those dots connect and I can't remember specifically what it was, but that's when I made that switch. And I do remember sitting down at dinner one day. My mum had cooked me a steak because she was still cooking for my dad and myself, and she was still cooking animal flesh. I remember seeing that in front of me, and then that one day, maybe after all those dots had connected, I remember saying, I don't want you to cook this for me anymore. I didn't go vegan then, but I went off some meat. I went off red meat, and then maybe about over a period of several months, I eventually went off, and the last thing that I went off was dairy. I made that switch, and I remember that moment actually sitting in my bedroom, like having almond milk in my coffee for the first time. I'm like, oh, I don't like this. But then a week in, I had been completely adjusted and never looked back. And then the whole kind of activism journey began after that. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Did you immediately start activism, or was it more of a time period in between?
Again, it was actually my mum. She was it'd been a couple years into veganism, maybe one and a half, or even two. I'm not entirely sure. It could have been around 2018, 2019. So a year or two. My mum actually got the confidence to go in to do outreach at AV in Perth. and I thought that
Wow.
was crazy. I was like, oh my god, Jesus, that must be. I didn't. I just not like I looked down on it. I just thought, man, that takes a lot of confidence to get out into the street and have everybody looking at you, wanting to challenge you. But she got me to come along. Well, I think I made the decision to come along actually with my entire family at that point, I believe, because even my dad had gone vegan at that point. And we all went there for the day. And I had a few conversations, and I just kind of flowed naturally out of me. I just loved talking to people about it. I don't think I had a particular method or anything. I just was talking. And I was like, oh, this feels right. I wasn't very consistent after that point, but I then started to take part in DXE once that started up in Perso Direct Action everywhere. When I did that multiple times, quite regularly. Again, still with specifically my mum, my sister, and my dad, maybe on and off doing that. And then I met Tash through that. Actually, we had quite a thriving community at that point back in 2019, 2020, before COVID. And then COVID happened, and Tash and I continued, and a lot of people dropped off for obvious reasons. And then that's kind of when it all started with Tash and filming her protests and on from there.
Oh, that's awesome. Have we seen your mom on video, by the way? Because you said she's been doing outreach.
She doesn't film. She's never filmed herself, and it's actually been a few years since she's gone out and done outreach herself, but she will come along to certain things that we do. She was actually, did you see our protest where Tash poured blood on the butcher's window recently as the start of the year? We filmed
I mean,
that.
I've seen most of your videos, so I probably have seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, she it was a recent one around Christmas time, and she poured blood, and I was filming with a gimbal. Yes, and then I got chased down by butchers and stuff like that. I knew something was going to happen, so I actually got my mum to come and film with my iPhone. So she was the backup footage that we actually really needed on that day, because they ripped the camera out of my hand and held me up in the air. So yeah, she was still coming along to do certain things.
That's why you had the footage also from because I remember seeing the footage of you running with the gimbal.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
That was impressive, by the way, man. Like the way, I don't know if it was the gimbal that was doing the stabilization, but the top part was just going like this, and
it worked perfectly. I know, right? It was it was a brand new gimbal, and thank God it is still working. But so I got chased by that guy. I mean, they just went for me. They didn't even bother with Tash. They didn't even think twice about it. They've learned now. Every time we do a protest, they actually learn to go for the camera person first, because that's the footage. Plus, I'm also a guy, so maybe they think they don't really want to lay their hands on a woman. Not that that's the case, because they've assaulted Tash on many occasions. But anyway, yeah, I had to run, and the gimbal worked perfectly. But then when they got me up in the air, this big butcher guy eventually got me, because I'm focused. I just wanted to keep getting around them to get back to Tash. I could have easily ran away, but I'm there to film Tash. And then, eventually one of them got me, lifted me up in the air, and my feet were dangling. And at this point, I had like a lot of adrenaline, and they were crushing. This guy was crushing me, and I was so tempted to kick him like really hard in the knee, but I was like, nah, because I will get done for assault. And if I want my best chance at kind of getting these guys done for assault, I shouldn't attack. But then they ripped the gimbal out of my hand, and I literally thought it had been broken. I'm holding about, if I were to put a number on it, probably $6,000 worth of camera gear or more. It's very expensive, very expensive. I know it's risky taking it into these situations, but that's all I was focused on. I don't want to lose this. Carry me or do whatever you need, but I'm not letting go of this. But then they just fucking ripped it out of my hands. And at the end of the day, the police did absolutely nothing about any of that. They said it was a citizen's arrest. Yeah, it's crazy,
That's so
man.
stupid.
I know.
Yeah. But did your mom intervene in the when she saw you, like she filmed it, or did you tell her?
I kept telling her to just film. I kept shouting. I was just like, film. And she was like kind of having her words. If you listen to any of the reels that I made, or the entire protest, you'll hear her yelling, like, let him go. But I just said, just keep filming. Just don't stop filming, because you don't want to miss that.
Oh man, that's interesting. You have stories when you do such activism. Very interesting.
Yeah,
And
there's been some intense, very intense situations. That's probably up there with the most intense, specifically for me. Like I was chased by these guys, and yeah, that was quite a lot. And then actually on the way out, just to go on with this, some guy followed us out, and he went and bought tomato sauce from the shops, followed us out to my car, and as I'm sitting in the car, I'm actually really stressed. I had so much adrenaline rushing through me. I was actually quite emotional, to be honest. And this guy comes, this random uh, bystander comes along and squirts tomato sauce all over Tasha's face, the other woman that was in my car, and all through my car and on the outside of my car. And at this point, we just stopped filming. We could have had him on camera, and we do have him on camera, not just him doing that. I didn't end up pressing charges. I possibly could do that, but yeah, man, there's some really angry people out there, really, really triggered people, and they just can't handle the truth.
oh, that's fucked up. And like when you do these forms of activism, do you go somewhere where you're not going to do your shopping anymore, or is it, do you pick a store
No, that's
where?
my local shop. That's literally a shop I go to every
Oh
day. I pass
shit!
those butchers every day. Well, every day I go to the shops. Yeah. Um,
Oh shit!
yes,
Yeah.
we normally would kind of not. Actually, we've done the Belmont. So that's my local shop. We've done that uh, at least once or twice every year. We've done that butcher multiple times. So for me, no, I don't really care. It did make it a little bit awkward going back there for the first, couple weeks because I'm having to walk past and you feel the emotions. Actually, you kind of get a bit overwhelmed sometimes. I'm quite a surprisingly, I'm quite a socially. I've had a bit of social anxiety, so doing this stuff every time actually is really really intense for me. Like I never get used to it. I'm more comfortable now. I can get myself into these situations, but it's never easy. So having to come face to face with those types of people every single day actually does make my heart rate go up a little bit. But at the end of the day, I don't really care. If I had to go up to them and do it again, I would do it, and I've kind of got things planning. But I can't say too much about that.
No, I like that. And when you go and do these kind of things, what is your priority? So I understand your priority is filming, then it's the equipment, and then yourself. Like,
Mm.
how would you prioritize the things?
Mm.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it?
it's definitely getting the shot. Like Tash and I will specifically with that one, like we will plan exactly how it needs to look, and we went out of our way with this
Mm.
one because I knew that pouring the blood on that window was going to be a very symbolic moment, and I want to capture that really well. So, that was the main goal in that point. So I was like, I need to like make sure I'm often always walking backwards as well. So I'm like trying to like walk and film. But then like I wanted to just get that shot where Tash is pouring and getting like a nice up close. That's when a butcher comes and shoves me in the back. So then I'm doing a run and then I'm just trying to get back to Tash. So it's always to get the shot. Then it's to protect the equipment as well. But then, yeah, it's obviously, I yeah, my personal safety will often come third there. Because I kind of know generally whether I'm going to be hurt or not. Like I haven't actually been hurt, touch wood. Um, so I think you kind of have your senses about you as well. It's like, can I risk this? Can I go back into this knowing that they're not actually going to harm me? There's been multiple times now. That's probably the second time I've actually been picked up by somebody.
Oh wow.
It's happened in a store once before. They actually took me. Another funny story, just a quick diversion. We went into a supermarket a couple years back now, and this was the second time going in there, and we went right to the back of the store, and then that's when Tash started speaking. Well, she hadn't started speaking yet, and there was a store worker behind me, and Tash was in front of me, and I'm filming Tash. I get lined up with this door at the back of at the shop, and the moment I'm next to it, they pick me up without saying anything. We hadn't started protesting or anything. They just recognized who we are. They picked me up, took me into this back room. There was multiple other guys there. And I was like, holy fuck, I'm about to be bashed. Like, I was like, these guys are taking me into a back room. They're waiting for me. It was so bizarre. So then I kick a guy out in front of me. So I just like kick my legs out, kick him in the nuts or in the stomach. I don't know, in self-defense almost. And then they push me up against a door. And then they open the door and they throw me out, and it's actually the alleyway. They threw me out of the store, and then they shut the door behind me. And now Tasha's inside, and I'm like, fuck. So my first thing is I sprint around and go back in and start filming Tash. By that point, I think they had like picked her up and were removing her as well. We hadn't even started protesting. So that's just how recognized we are, and how people get away with the most crazy shit, assaulting us essentially, because I would say that's assault. And the police did come, and we told them what happened. We hadn't done anything, and they picked us up and literally manhandled us. But they said, oh, look, they said you were protesting and they needed to remove you. Well, we weren't protesting. Go and check the footage. It looks like you were. So the police don't do anything. It's crazy.
Jesus.
Yeah.
But I actually, my next question was if it ever happened to you that somebody stops you before doing the protest. But I guess that's the story that you just said that they.
That's. Let me think of another occasion.
But did you ever think about, like, because if you starting issues now with people recognizing you or going for you more than for Tash, and possibly hurting your equipment, did you ever think of like using, I don't know, I'm not a very good filmmaker, let's say, or something, but like a really large lens with a lot of zoom to film Tash from a distance and stuff?
Yes, we have a bunch of lenses now. I've actually got a 100 to 400 lens, so a very we're yet to use it in an activism setting. I have got an idea of a video coming up. It would be more of like an undercover thing, but we haven't actually used long lenses often, because there's a certain feeling you get when you watch these protest videos when it's up close, because it feels like you're there with Tash. Like, it's often we film her like walking in and I'm behind her or in front of her. There's something about kind of following her, like being with her, going into these situations. That's what makes it so intense. One that comes to mind was the first time we went to Louis Vuitton, and we followed her. I followed her in there, and I go around the entire store with a gimbal. And there was something about kind of being right there with her in this really intense situation, seeing everybody looking. It's like you're following. So I think that has a really certain effect. And so the lens we use is literally just a 20 mil prime lens, and it's not super wide, but it's wide enough that you can stay right with her. So we don't tend to use long lenses for this kind of stuff. Ideally, you would have a backup filmer, and sometimes we will, and that has a good effect. That does have definitely a good effect. Another situation where that does come in handy, having a backup filmer like that, is when we did the fire restaurant with that chef. I can't talk about him too much. I shouldn't even say that. In fact, I can't actually talk about it. Sorry.
You meant matches thing. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah,
the matches. Yeah.
I didn't name any names. We'll leave it at that, though. I can't. Yeah. It comes out naturally.
I get it. That's, I think everybody knows what that is, and it is fucked up.
Yeah.
But when you do these kind of things, do you plan also backups, or how much of the expectation there is for? I mean, obviously you expect some resistance when you go in doing these things, and you've been doing it for so long that you kind of know what to expect. But do you also have some backups planned? How much surprises do you get when you do these forms of disruptive activism?
Yeah, every time we plan for the worst. That's why I get so nervous as well, especially when we're doing something that we know specifically will piss off people. So with like the blood on the butcher window, like I was very nervous thinking about it for like a week prior, because you have to expect the worst. Do we normally have a backup plan? Kind of, yeah. I can't think of anything specific, but we would normally plan it out. And like, okay, if this happens, just go straight in, or if this happens, just do this straight away. So it's kind of like, if security notice you, or if a police officer notice you, or something like that, and they have a hunch that you're going to go do something, we'll just say like, okay, get straight to the point now. It's not normally like, it's nothing crazy, like nothing too different in a plan. But yes, we always think the worst, and thankfully nothing terrible has happened. Like, no one crazy has come out and done something really bad, but yeah, I mean, as you've probably seen over the years with some of the footage, is that yeah, Tash gets assaulted,
Oh
and
yeah.
nothing is often done about it. But we just need to film it and we need to expose it. We need to show how triggered people are about hearing such a factual message and a very important message that everyone should agree with. But
It's
the way
ridiculous.
people react shows the opposite, and I think it's very important to showcase that.
And when you don't film, let's say when you go to the supermarket to just mind your own business and I don't
Yeah.
know, buy something or whatever, do you ever get resistance then, or do you ever get people? Well, I suppose some people recognize you, but do you get good recognition or bad recognition, or what happens
Yes.
when you
Um,
don't film?
I personally don't get anything, which is good because I prefer to go about my day and not have to worry about that. But definitely Tash, yeah, it happens quite regularly, and it's mostly only ever good. Rarely will we have an actual troll come up. We have come across our biggest trolls sometimes
Oh,
in real life. They don't do anything. They they'll have a few words to say and then they're off. They're quickly out of there, because they're so afraid. They're often so afraid to actually say what they would say online in person. So it's often actually really positive stuff. It's people coming up to Tash. Just the other day, literally a few days ago, a woman came up and she started crying, just saying that she was so grateful for what Tash has done to help her. And we've had many positive things, especially when we're in the UK and Europe. It was so beautiful. So whilst we get a lot of hate for what we do, it's in person. It's always a lot of support. So that's a nice thing at least.
that is nice indeed. I mean, it's a bit of a recognition for everything you do, right? Because it feels just so. Do you ever get this feeling of losing hope when you do these kind of things and everybody just reacts the way they react? Because as you mentioned it, it's just fucked up how people react to it when you're just literally trying to tell the truth. You're not. It's not like you're attacking anybody. You're not saying anything. You're just conveying information. And if anything, okay, what? Just pouring some fake blood on something, they could just easily wipe that out, right? It's not like a big deal or anything. But
Not
people
compared
get
to what animals
such
go through.
exactly, and they get
Yeah.
such visceral reactions. Some people get so violent, as you said. And like, does any of this ever make you like hit you or impact you in any way, like mentally or
Yeah.
emotionally?
Yeah, it does. I've had many occasions where I burn out. Because like I said, and surprisingly, Tash is introverted too.
No.
I'm probably more extroverted than Tash in most social settings. But when it comes to this stuff, she seems to kind of like really thrive in it. She rarely gets bogged down by anything. Like in these really intense situations, she can quickly just turn off after that. Maybe it was a bit different the first few times, the first few years, but now definitely not. And I'm getting a lot better at it. But for myself personally, there's been so many times where we go and do these things and I feel so drained after just the build up for it, having to work myself up to put myself in these really uncomfortable situations. There's been various times where I'm kind of left just like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Or sorry, it's not that. It's like I always know I will be doing this. It's all I want to be doing and I want to pursue this as much as possible. But there's so many times where it's like like all this hatred and toxicity, especially even online in the comments section, like the
Yeah.
stuff that I receive all the time is horrible, let alone what Tash goes through with all that. Many court cases, we're being sued. There's definitely times where it's just like, oh, so draining. But you just, I don't know. I can't give any specific recommendations on like how I cope with it and or how Tash copes with it. But I guess having so many actual positive supporters, that does help when we do see the positive comments.
Yeah.
But also just knowing that whatever level of discomfort we go through, it doesn't even come close to the discomfort animals go through. I think you just kind of have to have that perspective. It's like, this is nothing absolutely nothing compared to what other animals have to go through. So with that in mind, with the victims in mind, you put yourself in the victim's position, and you just tell yourself, it's like, well, I could be at home and I could be comfortable right now, not have to put myself in these situations. But if I didn't do it, I think I would even be more disappointed and uncomfortable with myself. So it's always weighing it up. But yeah, that's just me. There's many hard times, definitely.
I mean, I get it. I feel like I don't even do what this disruptive activism, but I still run into these hard times, and it's never a problem. I believe that whether you will ever stop doing it because of it, it's more like you just get home, fucking crash, and be like, "Oh, why the fuck is it so hard?" And then you just decide that you continue because it's. I don't know. I assume it's the same for you, but it's never
Yeah.
an option to stop just because it's
No.
such a huge injustice happening that why would I stop? No, it's just ridiculous how difficult it is sometimes. Sure, I take a break from time to time, but that's it. No stopping. No, there's no reason to stop.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah, I think every activist could relate to that very, very
Yeah.
easily. It's this kind of, you come out of these environments, these situations, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how I can keep doing this. But then you just get it back, and I guess it's also a continuous road of improvement and working out ways to handle situations better. Even outreach. I've been burnt out by doing outreach, dealing with just assholes, to be honest. And
Yeah.
you leave those situations just like fuck. But you kind of like, you take some time. Sometimes you have to take time for yourself. Like there's been times where I'm like, I take a back seat for a couple of weeks, and I try not to even think about having to put myself into any situation. And then you recuperate, you get a fresh perspective, and you're like, okay. And actually, I come across some people now, like after I've taken a break, you come back into it and you come across people that would normally trigger you, and you've kind of built up a barrier to them. You're just less affected. And it's about maintaining that mental health, because there's no point, so to a certain degree, you can't push through burnout or whatever you want to call it, emotional fatigue. At some point, you have to, okay, I need a break. I need to
Yeah.
refresh my brain. And this is going to be different for every person. But for me, there are times where I have to do that. And you come back with fresh, and you can deal with situations a lot better. So, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I get it. I have at least one day per week where I just shut off everything and I'm alone. I'm also an introvert where I spend my time alone in my house and
Yeah.
I recharge basically because
Yes.
fuck it. But I feel like you specifically, since you touched upon this, like you specifically get so much hate online for no reason, honestly. Like your outreaches are actually very, very good. You're so insightful. You seem to try to reach the person right where they're at. You're not you're not forcing anything into anybody. Well, no outreacher is ever forcing anybody, but like I feel like you really are level-headed when you talk to people. You mention it logically, and you seem to be empathetic towards even the person that you're talking to. But what seems to happen is that you still get so much hate online. Like, why is that happening specifically to you? Because like it's so weird. Like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of you're also more famous, more known than others, like, right? So in that sense, you obviously will get more trolls than, let's say, me or anybody else. But I feel like, do you think that the percentage of trolls that you get is higher than the percentage of trolls that other people get?
I don't look through the comment sections too often on other people, but I would say yes, especially even for Tash. Like we have a very similar audience on social media. I think it really depends on where your videos are being pushed. Like the more popular a certain video gets, especially ones that get close to like, that go over 10,000 onwards to 1 million plus. Oh yeah, the comments are horrible. No matter how logical what you said was, no matter how straightforward and just factually neutral it is, you've got to get these people that just can't get their head around it. And it's almost like the small percentage of people that have something crazy to say are the ones that comment. Everybody else that kind of just sees it and scrolls through often don't comment. They just kind of take it in, they move past. So you always get the crazy people commenting. Rarely, supportive non-vegans. That's never going to be the case. It's not like you're going to have somebody that's not vegan compliment you, unless what you said was really actually eye-opening and profound to them. But that's quite rare. So I don't know exactly why Tash and I get so many haters. But yeah, I think, man, I can't tell you exactly why, but I think all vegans get it to a degree, and I just think
They do, yeah.
depending on how far your video gets pushed to a non-vegan audience, you're going to get more and more haters. But what I will say is that it's something we always keep in mind, like the number of haters you have is really only a measurement of how successful you are. Because as vegans, we want to reach a non-vegan audience, and as an activist, your goal is to disrupt social norms.
Yeah.
And when you're seeing comments like this, as long as you're keeping to the core message, as long as you're not, digressing so far away from the vegan and animal rights message that you're not even conveying a message anymore, as long as you're, presenting that message, you're disrupting these people to the degree that they have to comment something so negative that you've disrupted their mental state. You've disrupted their beliefs. That's the goal. That's what we need to achieve. So the more hate you get, if you're keeping to the core message of animal rights, is really a measurement of success. That's how we see it anyway.
That's a very very nice way of putting it, and that is true. But you will eventually have to reach all of these non-vegan people.
Yeah.
Often I wonder, but wait, before that, I saw Martin say, it's ridiculous the amount of trolls Jack and Tash have, content insults and derogatory comments. Yeah, it's insane. Especially when you talk to kids, I feel like everybody's like, why are you talking to kids? Why shouldn't he be talking to kids? What the hell are you talking about? Like, what is it for? But I feel like people who are wondering or who are calling this kind of stuff, I feel like are people who think that this kind of stuff is possible for themselves to do or something. Because I don't know how to put it. Like, it's ridiculous to think that. I mean, I wouldn't see, if I see an adult talking to a child, my initial reaction wouldn't be, why is there an adult talking to a child? It would be, okay, whatever. I wonder what they're talking about. That's it. Nothing particular. But they get this visceral reaction where they're like, oh, how dare you talk to a child?
Yes. What I would say, yes, because I get lots and lots of comments like this. This is kind of the worst of the worst that I get, which is calling me a pedophile. It's really, really horrible. Every time I'm talking to a younger person, teenagers, because they're often the people that come up to us and want to talk, and we need to talk to them. It's super important to talk to the younger generation. I'll get these horrible comments. And if I'm not talking to them, I have comments saying, oh, why is Jack taking a break from talking to little kiddies? Shit like that. So no matter who I talk to, there's going to be a comment talking about it. What the hell?
If you do 2 thumbs up, that's
all right. So what I think it is, though, is that these people, they're so you're hitting such a sensitive spot for them. You're really hitting their cognitive dissonance. You're really calling them out for their unethical actions, whether they believe that or not. When you see them talking to a younger person, it's like they're so worried that I'm going to convince somebody to go vegan and it's going to disrupt them in some way. It's like they just don't want to believe that what we're saying is true and actually influential, especially to a younger generation, because the younger generation represent humanity's future.
That's true.
And if I'm convincing young people, it's like it's triggering this unconscious part of them that's like, they're changing the future right now when they're talking to young people. I don't know. I could be philosophizing it too much. But I think that's what's happening. People get really, really triggered when you're influencing younger people, especially on a topic that they don't want people to be talking about. So that's my thoughts on that.
No, that's a good point. I feel like, honestly, I don't understand it fully because when I first found out about all the stuff happening, my initial reaction wasn't to start attacking the person saying it or to
I know.
comment on the people like, what? No.
Yeah.
So I feel like the normal reaction would be you tell a person, hey, this is fucked up thing is happening, and the normal person should be like, okay, what can we do to stop it? And then, well, I have a solution for you. That's why I told you. And the solution is to be vegan. And
Yeah.
then like, okay, thank you. Well, it might be difficult. And then you have this conversation with them and try to help them out maybe. But like
Exactly.
to behave as like, oh, like I do this experiment now where I ask people either about consent or abuse of power, and then I drop veganism at the end of the questions that I make them. Everybody agrees with everything: consent, abuse of power, everything. It's all immoral, whatever.
Yes.
The minute you drop veganism, brain stops
Yeah.
working, meat
Yeah.
is good. What the
It's
hell
so
is
funny.
it's I think
Yeah.
there should be studies done on this, because
Oh,
it's just so
absolutely.
ridiculous. It's just so
I
ridiculous how
know.
people react like this. It's something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a common one I ask people now is, what, should animal cruelty be illegal, and what should the consequences be for that? And the things people say when they say it should be illegal and the consequences, it's always like, oh, they should be obviously sent to jail, they should be abused. I had one person say they should be raped. Like, oh my god, that's serious. Are you vegan? Oh no, I'm not vegan. So it's like the biggest contradiction. It's the biggest contradiction, but that shows how disconnected people are from the abuse that they pay for every day. But yes, when you drop the V word, it's like it just all goes out the window and they become so irrational. I don't even know if I would have been like that. Like, I don't remember ever thinking like that. I think as time has gone on and veganism is really becoming such a trending topic and so
yeah.
well known. Like, everybody knows what a vegan is now. 10 years ago, not many people actually knew what veganism was. So it's like people are starting to think about it. So when that word drops, it's like so many thoughts and opinions come up now. Whereas in the past, maybe less so. Maybe it wasn't something that people thought about. But yeah, it's a crazy phenomenon to see how people react to that word, that way of living, such a simple ethical lifestyle of just not abusing somebody, because we all agree with not abusing other people. But then when you extend that to animals, it's like crazy.
It's and what's even more insane is that oh, I lost my idea. Fuck it, I lost my idea. Sorry, I was
It's all
looking
good.
at the comments that I see Andre as a childhood friend who is not vegan, by the way. So people from the comments, just do your thing and ask him why he's not vegan. He says, I think you should start only showing the solutions without saying the current state is wrong, and let people come to that conclusion themselves. Yeah, that's another thing. It's that which is interesting from the perspective of non-vegans, is that they assume that as vegan activists we haven't tried all the solutions to how to speak to people or how to it's just nothing. People, they always get defensive. They always, regardless of what you do. And
Oh
like
yeah.
recently I held a sign saying, why are you not vegan? And only kids started talking to me, which, by the way, speaking of kids, I also had the same experience, that a girl started talking to me and I was talking to her. I'll post a video soon, but and after a while I noticed that there was a adult woman sitting there hovering, and I'm like, oh, okay, that must be her mother or something. But eventually she left, the adult woman, so it wasn't her mother, but rather just an adult being like, why is there an adult talking to a child, or what's going on?
Yeah.
Weird.
I know, it's bloody crazy. Like, we shouldn't even have to think about that. Like, yeah. There's so much mistrust and fear in society now, like when it comes to this kind of stuff. Even putting veganism aside, just the idea of talking to a younger person as a grown male specifically is like, we have to be so wary and careful. It's like everyone thinks you have the worst intentions, and it's just like,
Yeah.
can't we just relate and talk to people? Like, why is age such an issue, especially when we need to talk about important topics? Yeah, crazy.
So one thing I really wanted to discuss with you, because I'm honestly, I like what you and Tash do a lot. I like disruptive activism, but I constantly end up in discussions where we question whether disruptive activism is positive or has a positive or negative effect, right? Because on one
Mm.
side, we always, obviously, you get visibility, you get to people, more people understand what veganism is. But on the other side, if people understand that veganism as a negative, with a negative connotation, then maybe that just makes their own personal road towards veganism a bit harder, right? So
Sure.
what's your take on this? Because you do it, I like it, I also would want to do it, but my question is, how do you feel about this? Since you do it so often, you probably have more of an insight about it than I do.
Yeah. What I would say is that disruptive activism has been a big part of all social justice movements in the past. And yes, it's going to piss off people. But the purpose of being an activist, and I think it goes under the definition, is somebody that disrupts social norms, if you could really narrow it down to that. It's somebody that's going out of their way to actively disrupt people's belief systems and what's considered normal within society. And there's so many ways you can do that, you know. But disruptive activism is kind of like the perfect kind of form of disruption. It's in the name. It's disruption.
Yeah, it's disruption.
You're going out of your way to grab people's attention, whether they like it or not. You know, especially if they're in the act of consuming animal flesh or purchasing or any type of animal product, and you're there raising your voice often, showing the footage to their face, playing the screams of animals. Yeah, it's understandable why that would piss people off. But at the end of the day, it's like, firstly, you could see this from the victim's position. It's like, what would you want someone to do for you if you were hidden away from society, confined, and you're sent to a slaughterhouse, gas chambers, the whole lot? What would you want someone to do for you? Well, you'd want them to do everything they can and every form of activism they can, you know,
Yeah.
Politics, outreach, any type of education, disruptive activism. That's really important. I want people to scream for me. Now, the question of effectiveness, well, yes, I mean, like I said earlier, you can look back at historical movements where it's been pivotal for creating change. You know, the suffragettes, Black Rights Movement, even gay rights. Whilst that pissed people off back then, the long-term effect of that is, wow, actually, maybe they have something to say. Maybe we should listen. Yeah. Gets people to listen. It gets people to question things. But most importantly, it creates social dialogue. You know, so many people know, and I'm just going to personally talk about us here, because through my own experiences, that so many people in Perth know of all non-vegans. And they speak about her and her message, right? And often it's not positive, but they know about animal rights now. If it weren't for disruptive activists really getting mass attention, like really getting like media, the whole lot, how many people would actually be talking about animal rights? You know, how often would it now come up at the dinner table because of somebody, for example, like Tash and other like mass disruptors, mass attention gaining people? So many people are now talking about it because of people like her. Positive, negative, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The fact is that it's being spoken about. Now the question is like, is it turning more people away? Well,
yeah, that's
my thoughts on that is, well, I don't think there's any evidence to show that. It's like, someone's already not vegan. Are they going to become more non-vegan and say, I would never go vegan because of Tash? Yeah, there's the people that say that, but like, I don't believe that. I really I don't find any reason to believe that. I haven't looked specifically at the evidence on this, like with just looking at disruptive activism for other people, for other movements in the past. I mean, we have personal anecdotal experience of thousands of people messaging Tash saying how effective it's been and how that was a turning point for them in going vegan, was actually seeing Tash go in and yell and scream about what is happening, conveying the seriousness of the message. I think people, whether they like it or not, they see the seriousness of it. They see, hopefully, the facts that she's presenting in the emotive way that she is, and they take a look for themselves and they make a decision for themselves. I'm not worried about irrational people that are just going to be like, oh, I'm never going vegan, because they were likely not going to go vegan anyway.
That's true.
Yes, you could have a one-on-one with them, but actually that's the whole point. Let's say someone really hates Tash and put off veganism, and then they talk to somebody else about veganism, and then some rational person just says, well, it's not that crazy after all, it's just, I guess it is just not exploiting animals, or maybe they might have a conversation with an outreacher after that. Kind of leads people on. It's a seed, right? It's a seed that's been planted that can flourish in another way. So I don't believe for 1 minute that it's detrimenting veganism. Not at all. It's only creating more public discussion, which is super important.
I guess one, I agree with everything that you said. I guess the only concern is, as people, the one need that we have is to belong, right? Is to feel that we belong, and to feel that to feel it's a feeling of belonging, right? So when you see destructive activism, and especially you and Tash, well, I'm sorry, not especially you and Tash, I mean, like, especially being manhandled or being evicted or something like that, I guess people could theoretically equate that, I would not belong. I don't want people to treat me that way or something. I don't know, like, if that's, I don't think that's an excuse for them not to go vegan. As I say, I don't think that anybody will at any point in time not go vegan because of it. That's kind of dumb. But I do think that in that sense, some people could be afraid of the label vegan. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
They may understand the idea.
I get what you're saying. What I would say to that is just like, I feel like that's just an irrational thing that potentially wouldn't last, or maybe that person's already afraid of it. But like, I think let's look back on the social justice movements in the past. Would people be afraid of saying that they're gay, outrightly? I'm talking years before, maybe, when people were afraid to come out, and people are obviously still afraid to come out now, but like, they're going to be afraid because these crazy gay activists have gone in and disrupted and created such a scene. I don't want to come, maybe in the short term. But I do know that the research I saw recently, that it was looking specifically at disruptive activism, that in the short term, it can create negative responses. In the long term, there's nothing showing that it has a long-term negative response. And I mean, looking at these social justice movements of the past and how people see them now in the long term, since it's been a while, I don't think anybody's complaining. Most people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense now, So yes, it could create a short-term response of fear of going vegan, or whatever the label comes with, after seeing somebody like Tash do a disruptive advocacy. But I don't see any reason to believe why it would put somebody off in the long term. Rather, it's only a seed that's been planted, as I said. So unless somebody can show me some evidence that actually is creating more of a detriment, because at the moment I'm only seeing positive movement grow out of it and the impact it's had on individuals, but also the evidence that I just mentioned, that it doesn't, from what has been studied, it doesn't have a negative long-term impact.
I'm with you. I like disruptive activism. I also think, at first, I'll be honest.
Well, sorry, just before I do finish and before you continue, I'm so sorry. I will preface that with, it is super important that you are consistent with the animal rights message when you're doing it, and you do it in a way that is, you have to be clear when you're doing these things, because it is a very volatile environment. Like, if you go in there, and I've seen people do it, where it's kind of like, did they really convey the message just then? Because if it's not obvious why they're going in and doing it, I guess it doesn't matter, because if it's not obvious, well, then people aren't going to know it's about veganism, etc., etc. But someone could say it's about veganism and then present a message that's so far from veganism that it might not be effective. But even then, I'm not too concerned about that. I'm just saying that if someone were to do disruptive activism, it is just very important that you have you understand the core message well, I would say. But sorry to interrupt you.
No. That's a good one. I forgot my idea, but what I wanted to just ask, It's okay. It's the vegan brain. It's all about the B12 deficiency. um, so I like disruptive activism. At first I was a bit skeptical about it, but after a while I realized that well, after you start doing activism on your own, you'll realize that you need disruptive activism because, as you put it, the one thing that disruptive activism does really well is not just plant seeds. I feel like planting seeds is maybe better than when you do in outreach, street outreach, but rather spread seeds. And that is very valuable on its own, right? Because it just gets people thinking about it. And then the minute that person goes on the street and starts talking to somebody, or maybe they look further into it, they realize that, fuck, I gotta change, or I gotta do something about it, right? So I believe that that is a very effective method. And only when you do activism yourself do you see that it's just not enough, because there's just so many people. Like, I sit with a sign, and out of 50 people, maybe one stops and talks to me, right? So that's 49 people that, if I hold a sign that doesn't say veganism or anything about it, then 49 people will not even think about veganism. Whereas if you do this, 49 people may be like, oh, I get it. You see blood, you see animals. So there is that. Yeah. So
Yes,
but
absolutely.
have you thought about
it does spread seeds, and I just will add on to that. We've had so many conversations with people that know of Tash and know and have seen all the disruptive activism that she's done, and they probably don't have a positive opinion on it. They don't think it's a good thing. But we've never then had a conversation with that same person that results in them saying, "I'm never going vegan because of you." It's never that. It's just, you just then have a normal conversation as you would with anybody else. A conversation you may have never got to have if it wasn't for the impact that Tash had on them, and obviously so many other disruptive activists. I'm just talking about our own personal experience. So that's my anecdotal experience, is that I've never come across somebody that dislikes what we do, but then you can't still have a good normal conversation with them that could result in them going vegan. So that's my thoughts too.
And at any point in time, they don't have to label themselves vegan, right? They can just
Yeah,
not abuse animals. Nobody's
that's
saying
right.
you have to write vegan on
It's
your
such a
shirt.
logical thing to do. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, yeah, that's nice. Like, I like
Yeah.
that. Have you, while you were describing all of this, and as you told the stories at the beginning, one thought came to mind, and that is, you should be doing the vlogs, some vlogs every once in a while, or
We
I feel
used to
like,
quite often, actually.
yeah, I feel like when you do these disruptive activism styles, and if at the end of the video, or if at another video, you see the community afterwards, and how all of you unite afterwards and plan or unite, and I feel like it's such a powerful message to also to the
Yeah.
people themselves, seeing that there is a community behind it. There isn't just something happening. There isn't just some person
Yeah.
screaming. There's actual community. There's actual plan to this. There's actual thought put into this. And the
Yes.
reason why all of this is happening is because, well, the message, the vegan message, right? So
Yes.
have you thought
Yeah,
about the
so on Tash's account, there's lots of vlogs on there. We used to do them quite a lot, actually, especially when we're traveling and stuff like that. But specifically around the activism, yeah, there were some times. So like, there were times when, I painted her as a cow, and we had it filmed, and we did the before and the after the protest, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing to do. I want to potentially start doing vlogs on my account as well, maybe some like behind the scenes stuff. I'm sure. Yeah, I think I agree with you. It would have a good impact in terms of showing a relatableness about us. People can relate more to what we're doing, and seeing that we're just
yeah.
normal people going out there trying to convey a positive message. Yeah.
By the way, dude, I remember there was some news about some people coming to Tash's house and doing barbecue. Did
Yeah,
that ever
that's meant to be
happen?
this month.
Oh, that's
It's meant
meant.
to
Oh,
be.
it's
Yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll
um,
see. I have no idea if it's actually going to happen. I'm not going to deny that there's going to be some people that possibly turn up. So if that's the case, we'll have something planned for them.
Jesus Christ! Some people,
I know
like,
it's crazy, isn't it?
the level of effort that they put into trolling you could
I
so
know.
easily be put into just changing or
I
doing
know.
something better.
It's
It's
crazy.
yeah, it is.
We have
It
some
is.
pretty powerful haters out there. I think Tash. Well, actually, it's aimed at myself and Tash, and even my family. These hate groups that have these extremely dedicated haters in there. I think it's probably has about 15,000 people in there. It's
Jesus.
like the Tash Peterson hate group. There's probably multiple of them. I don't look at them, but yeah, we have a lot of people, and most of those people are probably based in Perth. I'm not entirely sure, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. Crazy, crazy people that have nothing better to do with their lives.
So when you're in Perth, do you know, has it happened to you that you have seen the same police officer more than once, or do you
Yeah,
already kind of,
I
are you
think so.
already
Yeah.
kind of friendly with the police, or
Um, oh, it depends what police officer. The Perth police typically haven't been that great. We haven't had many positive experiences. There's a few, where they're, quite genuinely nice people. But Perth has been not so great with police interactions. Nothing violent or anything like that. It's not like we've ever had the police do anything. It's just the way they handle the situations and how unfairly treated we are. But when we go to the eastern states, so when we have been to Melbourne and Sydney, it's actually really positive over there. The police are much more, and I'm talking very generally here, but like there's been police officers that wanted a photo with Tash, for example. They're much more accustomed to protesting over there, much more progressive in that regard. But here in Western Australia, we like to call it the Wild West. It's just not the case. We actually have a very they call it a draconian legal system. It's very old school in terms of just so many laws that we have here. Like even just like what I said about the citizens arrest, I don't know if that's in the eastern states. It might well be. It might be an Australian thing, but even that was crazy how like they were able to arrest me because they thought that I could have been committing something like a criminal offense. I wasn't, but the police said that. The police said that to me. I'm like, that makes no sense because
it's
firstly,
ridiculous.
I wasn't. What's the word? Like inciting Tash to commit a criminal offense. So me being there doesn't make me the criminal too. Anyway, it's crazy, but there's so many things that are very backward here. So the police, yes, generally not so good here in Perth.
Oh wow, yeah, it's sad to hear that, because since you're doing, how often do you do activism, by the way? How often do you
um, it's been a little more difficult this year so far for just personal reasons, but we try to still go out at least once a week to film outreach. The protests are much more spread out now. We don't even have anything planned in terms of protesting, but we generally will try to get out once a week to do something. When we're traveling and we go maybe to Melbourne, we'll do that every day, But
yeah,
a lot of it entails editing, as you probably know yourself. So it's like
yeah,
we can kind of like get a bulk of outreach clips, and then we can use that for 2 weeks sometimes. That's the beauty of shorts. But I think we're trying to get to a point now where we put a lot more planning and time into a video. So that's definitely where I want to be going. For me, like I'm just trying to trial all different styles at this point in time. Like, YouTube still feels quite new to me. Like I maybe only
same.
started technically maybe 2 years ago, but even then it's just been, I wasn't very serious about it at the start. It was more like Tash kind of getting me into it, like, oh, you got to post your conversation. So I would occasionally do it, and same with Instagram. Um, so yeah, I'm still kind of dabbling. I don't really have like a very like, that's something that I've personally struggled with, has been like, what is it that I do? What is it that I want to be putting all my time into, like just so steadfast on that. I think For Tash, potentially it's been a little bit easier, but even then, like I said, protesting is not something you can do every single day,
Yeah.
especially with the legal consequences that we face continually. We have to be very specific about when we pick the days that we do that. So even for her, there's been times where it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So that's when we started doing these outreach clips a lot more often now, which has been quite good. So generally, there's always something to do, and we kind of get out as often as we can. But I would like to get to a place where I'm working on like bigger projects. I think that'd be pretty cool, or like bigger video ideas that is going to reach a bigger audience. But yeah, that's the fun thing with YouTube. What about you, man? Like, what are you focusing on at the moment, and kind of where do you want to get with your social media and YouTube and stuff?
Yeah, thanks for asking. First of all, I agree with you that most of the time is spent doing editing, which I hate. Not that I hate editing, I hate that my time is mostly spent editing.
Yes, yeah.
So I recently, I think a couple of weeks ago, I did live outreach where I just put my phone and outreach people live, so then I didn't have to edit the videos afterwards.
Nice.
Which was, I thought that was the best. So I'm now I'm thinking of incorporating that kind of in the schedule somehow. But kind of in Netherlands, it rains often, so I solely depend on the weather. But yeah, the same as you. You know, I'm trying to make videos. I'm trying to get into not just outreach videos, and maybe, but I never, because I always edit outreach videos and also like, how do you feel like? Because for me, I record a lot of conversations, but I don't post all of them because some of them they just like, I don't know. You know, it's they don't feel like it's worth posting, or they don't feel like it's even worth stuff. Do you get that? Like, how do you measure whether a video is successful or not?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's something that I'm always asking myself. I would say it's like, it really, like, for us it might be a little bit easier. Like for Tash, if Tash is going to go do an outreach specifically, you can always guarantee it's going to be a bit interesting because they already know her. They already have opinions based on her. So her chances of getting something interesting is much higher. For me, I kind of can use a bit of that too. But often, it's conversations that people have probably heard so many times in the past. Exactly. It's a difficult thing with outreach, isn't it? Because you could just be asking the same questions. So something that I've done is change up the questions. Another thing Tash does, obviously, which I don't do, is costumes. But however, in saying that, I do have this, which I'm yet to use. I got my Farmer Jack hat. So I've actually got a costume coming up for that.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I got it.
You look like Indiana Jones, by the way.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool hat. I had to do some searching for this, but this is because normally it's wool or skin essentially, but this is a fully polyester hat. It's quite nice. So I've got my farmer costume. I got some video ideas for that. So it's just kind of like, you have to kind of think like, how can you make each interaction a little bit more interesting? Because outreach, it is difficult, especially when you're doing AV where it's typically the same method every time, which is a super powerful kind of speaking outreach method. But when you're trying to create some interesting content, it doesn't always make for the interesting video. So it's definitely a balancing game you have to always play when you're going out and filming these videos.
And in a lot of your videos, I saw that you have a sign. Most of the times you hold a sign and you wait for people to come to you, or do you go to the people?
I was just about to talk about this. Yeah. That's also been the other thing that we've had to try to figure out over the years, essentially, is it was always signs at first, standing there and waiting. And man, I hated that at first. Like the idea of people walking past and looking at you, and you feel like such an idiot standing there with a sign, right? So actually, in saying that, we don't even really do that anymore. We don't really stand there and wait. What we do now, especially just in the last couple of months, is we walk around and we look at people and we judge whether somebody might make for an interesting video.
Ooh.
Yeah, so then it's normally like, it's always going to be teenagers. If there's a group of teenagers, it's just like a no-brainer because they're so open with their opinions and thoughts, and how they feel about things, and it always tends to make for a relatively interesting video.
Yeah.
But like, so you probably saw my recent debate with that guy, the middle-aged guy, the
Was it?
hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
was such a
he
good
was
video.
just a performer, and I saw him packing up. So I was like, okay, I'll go ask him. He was wearing some like gold sparkle shorts. So I was like, oh, that would be good for a video. But then he put his pants on, so I was like, oh damn, that's kind of, so I wanted that in the video, but he said, yeah, I'll be a part of an interview. So we kind of just do it like that now. We just walk through and but there's a trade-off to that. So when you're holding a sign waiting for people to come to you, people come to you when they have an opinion. So
Yeah.
you might not be able to pick that, right? So they come
Yeah.
up to you and they have something to say, and that generally is always going to be relatively interesting to capture. But when you go up and you find people, you can guarantee a conversation. You're not having to wait there awkwardly for somebody. You can just go find the person. So I don't have a particular method, but that's something that we do now. We choose between those. And then there's the other one, which is a debate table with a sign, which we
Yeah.
don't normally do often, but that also has a good effect too.
But when you go to people, do you tell them that it's about veganism, or do
If
you,
they ask.
like, if they ask? So you
Yeah.
usually just tell them, hey, do you want to help me with my YouTube channel? Just ask you some questions and stuff.
Yeah, so it'd just be like, hey, are you interested in being in a video, an interview video? And most often people would be like, most people would just be like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, that seems interesting. It's novel to people to be, okay, I haven't been in a video before, I'll do that. Or they'll just say, no, I'm not, I don't think I can. And then whatever, you just leave it. But yeah, you just say, do you want to be in an interview? And they'll say, well, what is it about? Sometimes I'll just say, oh, you'll find out once they've already agreed. But if they're not agreeing until they find out, well, they'll just say it's about veganism. And still people are
Yeah.
often interested by that. So
Oh, that's very cool. That's
yeah,
a
it
very
works
cool
well that
method.
way.
It works, but I think you always need two people for that, right? Whereas I'm usually alone, so it's
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I
it
haven't
works.
gone out and done anything by myself. I probably would struggle with that. I would love to be able to, but especially when you have a camera, I'd feel so uncomfortable just kind of leaving that just
Yeah,
there, especially when it's expensive and you're in a city. I would worry about someone coming and grabbing it, but there's obviously Cliff Grant who does that. He literally goes out there by himself. He only stands there with a sign and he sets up the camera and he gets amazing conversations.
yeah,
So that's awesome. That's bloody awesome dedication, and I would like to just be able to do that too.
yeah. I do that, but I don't worry so much about people stealing my camera because I feel like a lot of people are tourists. We're in the area that I go
Yeah,
to in Amsterdam,
yeah,
and I don't think tourists are that interested in. And the square where I go to, it's literally called the Museum Square. So it's people who are interested in museums and stuff. So I don't think they're like,
yeah.
oh yeah, I'll
I
steal a
wouldn't
camera
be too
now.
worried in Amsterdam.
Yeah,
I here in Perth, yeah, there's some sketchy people walking around. Like even when I'm holding the camera, I have people kind of come up and yeah, like people touch the camera. Like it's just there's assholes. So I couldn't risk it by myself. So yeah, we always have another. It's always us two. But in saying that, like if we went to a university, I'm thinking of actually doing that by myself sometimes. I could
yeah.
just go during the day, set up a table, set up a tripod. I'm not worried about someone stealing at a university. So that's an option.
So I gotta ask, since you mentioned all of this, the banana, what like the banana microphone, is that I've been speculating about it. I'm like, oh, these people are geniuses. They do this because the other person will remember. They'll go home and they'll be like, remember that guy holding a banana. Also, people in the comments will be like, why are they holding a banana? So it will help with engagement. Like, was it just like a
Yeah.
fluke, or was it an actual planned thing?
Well, no. So the banana was like Tash bought that, and it literally fits. It's 3D printed and it fits a big
Ah,
AI mic in it. But I started using spatulas because
yeah, yeah, that's truly
I didn't
awesome.
have anything else, and we'd be traveling in Airbnbs, and I would take a spatula. And the one that I use now is actually one that I forgot to return to the Airbnb. So the spatula I use is that, and it also came from the idea from Rafaela, the militant vegan, because she uses a spatula, and I thought, oh, that's a
Ah,
great idea. And people say it in the comments section, they just bring it up, and so it's just a fun little thing to do that. Yes, it could increase engagement maybe, but you get remembered that way as well. So if it's the spatula or the banana, ideally you would have a whole collection of different kinds of microphone holders. You could use a banana. I don't know. I'm sure you could think about a bunch of different ideas, but yeah, the banana's a funny one. It's the only annoying thing about it is it's not very long. So like you're essentially just having your hand right up to their face, you know, whereas a spatula, it's still long enough to do it comfortably. So yeah, it's pretty funny though.
Have you ever had anybody slap the microphone from your hand or something?
I don't know if I personally have. Not that I can even remember. Obviously, when you're doing a protest, you expect that, but I don't think I've had it in an outreach. Tash has had somebody come and smack a tray of dog meat. This was years ago. She had like the fake dog meat there, and a woman came up and smashed it out of her hands.
Yeah.
But no one's touched the microphone. Yeah, surprisingly.
Interesting. Well, I guess people when you interview them, they already agree to being interviewed. They're not like being forced into
That's
it or
right.
something.
Exactly. Yeah. We rarely would go up and just film somebody randomly, unless you're doing the whole sign holding and you're filming from afar. Well, you're always filming at that point, and they're not. People do get annoyed by that sometimes, like because they think you're just, especially if you're doing like AV, like you might just be filming. Someone might be filming you from 10 meters away, and then someone comes and talks to you. I actually always feel so uncomfortable personally because it's like, do they know the camera's there? And am I trying to like trick them to believe that there's no camera? And I don't want to make them run away because I'm telling them they're on camera. I always felt so uncomfortable doing that. So this current method that we do, whereas we go up and ask somebody, do you want to be in an interview? You don't have to worry about that. They've agreed to do it and you feel fully comfortable. But there's a certain effect of filming somebody without their consent technically, or knowing that they're being filmed, because it creates a different reaction. But sometimes them getting, if they're an angry person and they're already triggered, them kind of not knowing they're in camera can create an even more angry reaction, like, oh, you're filming me, you know. It's like, well, why are you so triggered? I'm just talking to you about this topic. And then it creates for a certain video effect. So there's so many ways that you can do outreach, so many different forms, even just how you initiate the conversation that can have an entire effect on the whole conversation and the video. So these are all things that we can think about if someone is trying to create some interesting content.
So, okay, interesting. And when you pick, because you said you pick the people, walk me through it. What is it that you look after when you pick these people? Or not necessarily what is it that you look after, but also kind of what is the preferred outcome of the conversation?
Oh, yeah. Well, when we're looking for people, I already have a very good eye for people. I can sense people quite well. Whereas Tash maybe less so. Like the reason I say this is because there's been so many times when I'm out filming Tash and I know someone's going to do something 20 meters before they even come. Just a look in their eye, the way they're walking, I can sense it. And I've done it so many times. That's how I know I'm good at it. So when we're walking through the city and we're picking somebody to outreach, I can generally gauge that person. I can't put a word, I can't actually say why I feel that. I'm not even saying that this is the case, but generally you can, and I think anybody could do this. There's some things about how people walk, how they're talking to somebody. You can just tell if they're going to be more exciting, engaging. Like I said, teenagers is an obvious one.
Yeah.
Because just by default, teenagers tend to be more outgoing, open, and sometimes opinionated, or just kind of like blasé with how they talk about what they think and stuff like that. So that's always the case. Middle-aged people, it's actually harder because most of them, they don't, I don't know, like they just don't want to be on camera sometimes. They're going about their day. They might be in the middle of a work day. They might be on their way somewhere. But like for example, like I just said about that guy in that recent debate. He was an acrobatic, he was a performer. So it's just like, oh, obviously I need to go ask that guy because he's already a performer. He has confidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just general ways that we can pick people, but at the end of the day, anybody's going to make for a good conversation because veganism is something that everybody can have a thought and an opinion on. But yeah,
Has it
that's
happened to
generally
you?
what I think.
Has it happened to you that you picked somebody who was already vegan?
No, no.
No.
Oh, yes, actually, sorry. Well, I mean, I've had people come up, like if we're at an AV event or we're holding a sign, vegan
Yeah.
people will generally come up to us something that's associated with vegan, but I've never like accidentally picked a vegan.
Okay, that's cool. Oh, wow, you're vegan dar. No, your non-vegan dar is good, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Or maybe it's because 99% of people probably are vegan.
And
I don't know what
out
the
of
number is.
conversations, out of these conversations, would you rather have like a calm but
Oh,
constructive
yeah.
conversation, or ridiculous but engaging conversation, or
Yeah.
somewhere in between? Like,
It's you want a mix of everything, but
yeah,
I would for social media, yes, obviously the dramatic, funny, they always perform best. But then again, you have to still mix that up with very constructive conversations, I think. Just for just well-roundedness. Because like I've gone through periods where okay, I'm getting lots of views, and then you go through lulls, like where it just goes low, and that's just how social media works, especially with the stuff we do, where it's so based on chance. Like
yeah,
our videos, when you're doing outreach and stuff like that, it's so dependent on the person that you come across, right? Because if they're a boring
yeah,
person, it's less likely to perform very well, no matter how you present that, and no matter what questions you ask. So the dramatic, funny ones. So when we have people that know us, they come up to us, they're angry, or they just want to be funny on camera, they tend to always perform really well. But then they often not showing a constructive conversation, whilst we still try to get messages in there. We'll still get an animal rights
yeah,
message in there, that's super important. Like, so if I was just to name an example of mine where my most popular one is this one with this fisherman that comes up. I don't know if you've seen it. He's like a surfer guy, long hair, blue shirt, and he comes up and he's like, I can't remember exactly right now, but he had no idea what I was talking about to these kids, and he comes up and he just sees me talking to kids, and he's like, "Why are you talking to kids?" And then I'm like, "I'm just talking about veganism." And then he has his opinions, and it's just a funny interaction, right? But I still got an animal rights message in there, but he was also an interesting character, so therefore
yeah,
it now reaches lots of people. So at the end of the day, look, you're still getting an animal rights message out, even with
yeah,
these like less constructive conversations. So ideally, you'll just have those all the time where you can get lots and lots of views, hopefully, um, but also get a message out there. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's people like Earthling Ed, like Cliff Grant, that have these like really good conversations often, rarely like, really dramatic over the top. There's always
yeah,
interesting characters. They're always interesting people. So I think you can always have a conversation that's deep and engaging and really thoughtful, and like you're trying to get into their mind and make it a very interesting conversation. So I don't think there's any one way to make a video good and what type of conversation you should get. But generally for social media, that's kind of what I think.
Do you ever start a conversation with somebody doing outreach, and then you get lost and think like, oh, I want this conversation is going to be so good, or like thinking to yourself, this conversation is not good enough, or something like that, while you're doing the
Yeah,
conversation? Like,
yeah. That
yeah, it
happens.
has happened.
That happens.
Yeah,
Like, especially if it's quite a boring one, you don't want to
yeah,
just end the conversation because this isn't going to perform well, because that's horrible. Like you're still talking about that could be a potential
yeah,
vegan, so you always follow it through.
yeah,
But that reduces your energy for the next few conversations where it could be a really engaging one. Um, if you know you're having a good conversation, you just know you're having it, and it's good. It's enjoyable because you're like, yes, this is good. You have a lot to say. You're opinionated. This is definitely engaging, and you kind of just get more into the zone. But yes, you do get those boring ones, but you kind of just have to follow it through, because it's an outreach conversation at the end of the day. But when you're filming a video, yes, it's definitely in the back of your mind, isn't it? And you're like,
Yeah.
so that's why us going and picking people now versus us kind of waiting for people to come, and then is it going to be a good conversation? Is it going to be very boring? Not sure. So when we pick people, it's kind of like we're getting a decent gauge on whether it's going to be a good conversation. Or if you're holding a sign, hold a very eye-opening message, a confronting message question, that the chances of you getting an interesting conversation from that question is much higher. So that's another important thing you can do. So like the examples that I've done is, who would you save or who would you kill? And it's got a dog and a pig, with the spin being that you can save both, but you don't make it clear. So that's like, it's got to make an interesting conversation because everyone's just say, oh, the dog, the dog, the dog. So that's just an interesting thing that we can all do, to provoke a better conversation. So there's different ways of going about it.
Oh, that's a very interesting point. Yeah, I have seen your videos about the dog versus the pig, and they're good. They're good. Yeah, it's an interesting way of. I never thought about it that you intentionally do it like that. That I thought, okay, yeah, it's a bit confusing that you could, because I also didn't think I could save both, but then you're right. It's a way of getting people to be like, what? I could save both. Why didn't you say that? Or,
yeah, or like the more obvious one, should it be illegal to abuse animals? And you have a picture of a dog, so they're just thinking dogs. And then they say, yes, absolutely, it should be illegal. These are the consequences, like I said earlier. And then you put the spin on it. So does that apply to all animals, the animals that you eat? So again, it's just whatever question you can have, just to make it, to ensure that the conversation you're going to get out of it is going to be unique, interesting, eye-opening.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, by the way, I took notes to this conversation, so that's
awesome.
nice. Yeah. So do you have any well, let me ask you, how do you see the future of activism being? Like, how do you see it, let's say, in the 5 years time, or how do you see vegan activism happening, maybe for yourself, but also like maybe worldwide? Like worldwide, I mean, like
yeah,
in the whole vegan community.
Well, okay, I can just start with myself because that's easier. Like for me, and I can't exactly speak for Tash, but we kind of are on the same page with things. I want to be doing more. So I don't know if you saw our dolphin meat one where we pretended.
Yeah, I saw that one. That was really good. Yeah,
I definitely want to go down that road. So as I have a farmer costume planned, I actually have a fisherman costume planned. I also have another one that's very similar to Happy Dolphin, coming up as well. So I really want to because I love doing that. When I did that with the Happy Dolphin, it all was improvised and it was actually Tash's idea, but I just loved just reverse psychology on people, like just absolutely making them believe something just by lying and acting. And I think that's entertaining for everybody, non-vegans and vegans. It's a social experiment. I really want to go down that route of playing characters, reverse psychology, social experiments. I think that's really entertaining, as well as debating. Like I've done a lot of outreach. Debating is a whole other thing.
it is, yeah.
A big, for example, I've watched a lot of Vegan Gains and his debates online recently, and that's been a big eye-opening thing for me in the way that we can converse in a more debate format. I find them interesting and just kind of entertaining because you it has to be a thought-provoking conversation that you're going a bit deeper. It's not just the end goal of convincing someone to go vegan, but actually just showing how illogical it is to argue against it and really kind of getting into that. I love that too. So, but now like the future of activism, it just needs to become more and more diverse. more and more
Yeah.
people. That's the most important thing. Like, I don't think activism itself has to change. I just think that we need more and more avenues, politics, street activism, education, debating, like I said, like social experiments, all these different things to create more and more attention, disruptive activism, obviously.
Yeah.
Just with more people, that's a very important thing. It needs to become more normalized, and there's that number by the social scientist Erica Chenoweth that says 3.5%
Yeah.
of a population need to become consistently active to start creating systemic change. Now, there's only, you could possibly say at most 1% of the world population's vegan or something like that, or
Yeah.
I don't know. Country to country is completely different as well, but that's so far. That's just vegans. That's so far from the 3.5% number. So how many of those vegans are actually consistently active? A fraction of that. So we're still far away from 3.5, but that's a lot closer than 50%. That's a pretty motivating number. So the future of activism, I think, is getting more people to become active. So every vegan, ideally, becoming an activist, a consistent activist, and persuading as many people to become activists as well. And with a big diverse range of activism as well, I think is important.
That's a really good message. Yeah. By the way, I didn't know. I knew about this number 3.5%, but I thought it was about vegans, not vegan activists. Now that you say vegan activists, it's like, okay, makes a lot more sense. Yeah, it's true. So what would you say to somebody who's starting activism now? Like, what advice would you give them?
Uh, yeah, I would say it's a big learning process. You got to apply your interests and your skills, because, like I said, there's no one way of doing activism. So, personally, um, I'm not much of I'm not a disruptive activist. So I filmed Tash doing disruptive activism, but I find it so difficult to do it. I've done maybe one by myself, and I had to work myself up so much for it. I hate hearing myself yell. It's so uncomfortable for me. Am I going to do it? Potentially, yes. I want to push myself to do that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. But I find my interests, I have to put myself where my interests are. So for me, it's talking to people, conversation, filming another activist, helping them out to create content. That's something that interests me. So that's activism too, technically. And so for other people, it could be, like I said, is getting into politics. It could be, man, there's so many forms of activism. So essentially what I want to say is, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? And then find ways to do that to apply that to animal rights activism. So how can you create more awareness and disrupt social norms around animal exploitation and get as much attention to that message by applying yourself? But you have to kind of start small to a degree, and you have to connect with other activists too. I think that's very helpful. You don't have to, sorry, but it's very helpful to work with other people, learn from other people, watch other people online, continually learn and grow, film yourself if that's the type of activism you're doing and that makes sense, because then you can watch it back and you can continually get better and better. For myself, that's obviously super important. Like the way I speak to people has changed so much just over 2 years because I get to watch it back and post it and get feedback from other people. I feel so far from where I actually want to be as a speaker. I'm very critical of myself. Very, very critical, sometimes too much so, like a bit of a perfectionist. And so that's not extremely helpful, being a perfectionist. Not that I can't say I'm leaning towards that. I'm just very critical of myself. But you have to be critical to a certain degree. Like, I seek feedback from people, even if it hurts. And that's how you get better and better at whatever avenue you choose to do. So generally, that's kind of what I would say to a new activist.
That's a good one. Yeah. So let me just say that the reason why I appreciate your channel so much is because I feel you bring a different perspective to the conversation when you do it. And I always like that because I'm like, oh, I never thought about going it this way necessarily. And I mean, obviously, when you have these vegan conversations, you did, as you said, AV, and in AV, they kind of force you in this box. You ask this, ask this, ask this. It's very well structured. But what I really appreciated about your conversations when you have them is that while there is some structure to it, the structure is always it's not that said it's a bit different. It's always a bit different, and I like that because it kind of shows an insight on how you think and how you see the arguments being brought. Because veganism is a simple thing to understand, right? It's just don't use animals. But activism on itself, it's like it's a bit more complex because you're kind of meeting the person where they're at, and you're like, okay, how do I explain it to this person in a way that they understand it? And you kind of have to go around that. And I think it's very interesting to see that. Well, at least I appreciate it because I think you do it differently than I do, which is always helpful to me. So and also your videos are obviously great because a lot of those conversations end up being really good. So I just wanted to put that out there because you said you're overly critical with yourself, and I know you get a lot of negative comments, but you should know that I think within the vegan community you are very appreciated for what you do and how you do.
I do really, really appreciate hearing that from you, and likewise, I think what you're doing is really good too. I think a lot of that comes into trying to keep the video interesting. So I don't want to do the same thing every single time. So the AV outreach method, super effective. Like I've had so many good conversations using that, but now I'm still applying that. Like I still apply those questions, but I'll just kind of do it when it seems right. I don't really think about it until that moment comes up where, oh, that's a good opportunity to ask one of these pre-planned questions. But like, for example, like even with that recent debate with the hunter, like I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I just went up to him and said, do you want to do an interview? And when I asked the first question, that was like, I just thought of that question then, or obviously I knew that question, but how I choose to start it is completely random. And then it often just leads into the same type of conversation you've had many times before. It's just,
exactly.
It's an excuse. So it's like, essentially it boils down to this every single time. It's like, why aren't you vegan? Are you against animal abuse, or do you support the idea of animal rights? And then you're just figuring out what is their excuse not to be vegan. And it's just about going through those excuses and then bringing it back to the message and say, how close are you to actually going vegan? Like how many more excuses do you have? And every conversation generally follows that structure. I'm trialing different stuff all the time. So I've been thinking a lot more of just how can I make it more simple. And I've learned this a bit more from like watching Vegan Gains, is essentially I want to come at it from this angle of like everybody that you speak to, most people agree and are in favor of human rights.
Yeah.
So ask them, like, why are you in favor of human rights? Well, it's because, you don't want to exploit, you don't want to hurt humans, you don't want to cause suffering to humans. And then maybe you can ask them why, it's like, well, because, we feel pain, we suffer, and essentially we're sentient. Okay, why don't you apply that to animals? Why don't you grant them animal rights? And then you get into name the trait. And there's so many ways that you can go about that. But I think over time, I'm trying to boil it down to what is the most essential thing? Like, what are the most essential things that we agree on? And that the quickest way you can expose their kind of logical inconsistencies and moving on from there and then helping them to go vegan from that point. There's no one way to do it. That's really the core of this. There is no one way to do it. And that's the beauty of doing this, is that you can just be creative in how you approach a conversation every single time. And that is a fun thing, to be honest. It's this constant evolution and constant growing and making mistakes as well. Like, there's so many times I watch something back in hindsight, I'm like, oh, why did I not notice that when they said that? It's just like, fuck, it's so frustrating. But you don't do it. You just try to improve on that the next time.
Interesting that you're. So for me, interesting. I also have a structure in my head, but for me, the structure is, of course, you have to get the person to start conversing with you in a way, right? That's the initial thing always, and afterwards, for me, is when I bring up veganism. I think the first thing that I want people to be clear is um, that they don't need to do this and what
Yes.
veganism actually is, because I feel like if I clear this up at the beginning, even if they leave in the middle of the conversation or something happens, they at least get good
Yes.
information. That's
Oh,
that's
I
the
agree with that. I'll try to do that sooner than later as well. Like you want to be very clear with the proposition and um, what it actually is about. Like you want to get the core message across sooner than later, and
yeah,
then you build on the conversation from there. It's kind of like essentially this is veganism. You're not vegan. Why aren't you vegan? Go through
exactly.
the excuses, and then ideally, when there's nothing left, you've wringed them dry. You've rinsed them dry of all the excuses. What's stopping you from going vegan now? It's just like, yeah, there is a general structure. I think it is important to have. Absolutely.
And how do you know when to stop? Because sometimes it's like they
Mm.
start repeating themselves. Sometimes the conversation, I don't know how it goes with you, but when I do outreach, I lose track of time because I have to focus on what the person is saying. I have to
Oh yeah,
be sure to
absolutely.
respond to what they do. So a lot of times I lose track of time, and it has happened to me that conversations that I thought were like 30 minutes were like 45 or 50 minutes, and I didn't post them
Yeah.
because they were too long or something. So how do you deal with that, with like with time
Yeah.
and with this kind of stuff? How do you deal with
Oh
do you
yeah.
stop conversations in
You
the
lose
middle?
track of time. Absolutely, you
Yeah,
do. Like so many times, I have no idea. Sometimes it could be like I had a 3-minute conversation because it's just a very quick one that we did,
yeah,
and I just didn't know there was 3 minutes. I just had a conversation. It started and it ended, and it was like, oh, that was super quick. I didn't even realize it. And then
yeah.
you have ones that were 30 minutes plus, sometimes an hour. And the only way you've gone for a long time is I'll look at Tash and she's like, oh, like tired of filming, like holding the gimbal or something like that. So that can happen too. But yeah, so when to end the conversation? Ideally, with every conversation, you would get through all their questions and excuses not to be vegan, essentially. Like what is their reasoning to not grant animals rights, or what's their reasoning to not be vegan and not abuse animals? Like you kind of, I'm just trying to think. I will always kind of go off the AV method in terms of how the conversation will end. It's kind of like once there's nothing left to get out of them, it's like, well, you want to, how does it end? It's like, it's so hard to think about when you're like actually going back on it. Like, how do these
Yeah,
conversations end? Because it's so intuitive. It just kind of happens. You get to a point where we've gone through everything now. So now it's basically about leaving them with this final message that, look, you agree that animal abuse is wrong. Generally, everybody would agree to that,
yeah,
you know, but then the reason you continue to pay for animal abuse is these reasons. We've gone through all of these reasons. Really, we found out that they're not justifiable reasons to continue doing it. So now it's just every day that you choose not to be vegan, you're going to continue to be funding animal abuse and murder, even though you're against it, which you've got them to agree at this point that makes them a hypocrite. And often they will agree with that. It's so surprising when you apply the AV method the first few times. And it's just like people, if you do it right, they often agree that they are a hypocrite, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's no one really wants to be living as a hypocrite. No many people are comfortable knowing they're doing something that they don't believe in. So yes, you could say the end goal would be to get them to say they're going vegan. Rarely happens, but to get them to agree with the principles of veganism and know that they are contradicting their beliefs and values by not living vegan, that's a pretty powerful thing. And then you can lead them on to other resources. Watch the documentary or go here and learn how to go vegan, how to do it. So ending the conversation is kind of just knowing that you've got them to agree at least that what they're doing is a hypocritical thing and it's morally not right to be continuing to do that, because prior to the
absolutely not.
conversation they didn't know they were a hypocrite and they didn't think what they're doing was morally wrong. So as long as you can get them hopefully to that point. It's not always going to happen, and obviously the ultimate goal is veganism. But yeah, that's kind of how I would approach it. But like I said, it's very intuitive and it just takes practice. And I would
That's true.
highly recommend following the AV method when you're first starting out. It's just so straightforward and intuitive, and it's what allowed me to become an outreach activist like consistently, because it just takes that the open-endedness of a conversation out of the equation, and it gives you something to follow and stay in control of the conversation.
It's a very good point. And I saw someone comment here that I wanted to ask you also. So the 40-year-old vegan says, sometimes people will go on a rant. It's good to interject and talk one thing at a time, just from what I learned. What's your take on people who do long rants and interrupting people in general? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, man, I've come across the king of dodgers, deflectors, all the time, especially when you get them in a corner with a question. So I know I've brought this up many times, but it's just because it's fresh in my mind. But the debate with that hunter is like, he was one of the biggest dodgers I've ever come across, to be honest. So there's probably many, but he was an ultimate dodger. He didn't want to bite, even though he kind of did, but he didn't want to bite the bullet on, would you do that to humans, what you do to animals? The amount of times he deflected. And then he'll go and ask me another question about something else, sharks or blah, blah, blah. And you kind of want to just answer it. Technically, though, if they haven't answered your question, this is something that is one of the biggest skills and something that I want to continue to improve upon, is to not be taken down their road of discussion, because they're deflecting away from the important question that they don't want to answer. Because if they answer that question, it's almost like a checkmate, right? They want to do everything they can. So it's so hard to stay focused on that. But if they haven't answered your question, you don't have to answer their question, because I asked a question. I'm conducting this interview with you, or maybe it's a conversation. So go there, answer their question concisely, succinctly. Make sure that you've answered the question. Ask them, does that provide you the answer is that an answer that's sufficient for you? Okay, now I wanted this question to be answered. What do you think of this? Blah, blah, blah. So it's just about, the hardest part is keeping that question, your question, in your mind and coming back to it. It is bloody hard, but
I agree.
that's how I would say it.
Yeah, because I feel like, okay, maybe my next question should be, how do you, because when you said all this, well, I have another question in mind, which, see, I have to work on this. Remember that question that I had. So how do you, obviously in a job like my previous job, I was a software engineer, and obviously you can tell whether a software engineer is a newbie or an experienced software engineer based on not necessarily but their coding skills, but rather also their architectural skills, how they would see things like that, right? Like, how would you say, what are the traits what are the traits that an activist would have? Like, let's say you are a company, you somehow make a company where I need to hire vegan activists, and you want them to be experienced. What is it that you would look after to see if they're experienced or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because that could be the future. Imagine that. That definitely could be the future, where you're actually hiring an outreacher or an actual activist. That would be pretty awesome. And obviously that is the case with certain organizations like Peter and stuff like that. Yeah. I would, first of all, the first thing that I would look for if I was hiring somebody would be how do they present the vegan and animal rights message? Like, what is the core message that they have in their mind? Because I think a key thing for a solid animal rights activist is knowing what does animal rights actually mean? Because for so long, I didn't truly get my head around it. Like, it's like, well, animal rights. So like, what rights? If some things you just kind of accept that, I'm an animal rights activist, but you haven't actually dived into what that truly means. So I want to know, like, what is their conception of that, first of all, and whether that's on par with what it should be, I guess. not that there's a definitive answer to that, but generally,
There is, yeah.
because I've seen, so I guess the reason I say this is because I've seen a lot of vegans and activists that don't really present a vegan message. They're more just plant-based, right? It's kind of like, it doesn't often relate to animals. It's like, oh, I'm doing it for health. I'm doing it for the environment. Yeah, that's not what really it means to be an activist. That's a vegan activist. That's just plant-based. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the reason I say that. And even amongst animal rights activists, the way that they can outreach is they're an animal welfare activist first, and they're not
Oh,
really knowing that. And I probably was like that at some point where I didn't truly understand the concept of animal rights, and you're kind of advocating in a way that you're advocating for just welfareism, which is important to improve welfare of animals. There's no denying that. But at the same time, you're actually promoting animal slavery without knowing it. So
yeah.
that's a very important thing. Other than that, though, man, like, you know, I wouldn't be. Yeah, it's a hard one because we're all so unique. I wouldn't want to hire somebody that fits a bill as long as they have that core message behind them. I just want to get a vast variety of skills that can be applied to this movement, and then
That's
allow
such a
them
good
to
way of
hone
putting it.
themselves. I would just, yeah, I would just want people to develop in whatever niche that they find themselves in, and how can they help the cause. That's kind of my perspective on that.
And that's a very good perspective to have. I feel like that's a very good answer. Indeed, what matters is that they understand the actual vegan message, which is about animal rights and not enslaving them. And then, I mean, I think each person's personality can be suited to another person who they're outreaching, right? So at the
Yes,
end of the day, that whether they're a bit more um, agitated or a bit more, I don't know, yeah, I'm gonna do it, or a bit calmer. It's to each their own, right? But there'll always be somebody who works better with that type of personality or not, right? So
absolutely. That's a good point, because every person that we're reaching is a different personality that responds differently. So someone that might go vegan because of Earthling Ed would have never gone vegan because of Tash Peterson, vice
yeah,
versa. So, and I say them too because they're actually
good one.
quite different extremes. So yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned name the trait. How what variable what kind of, how do you like to say name the trait? Do you like to say it, what's the difference between an animal and a
Yeah,
human? What is it that a human would need to lack to treat them as an animal? What is it that an
yeah.
animal need to have to treat them as a human? Like how do you find that it's best to use
I'm
name the
actually
trait?
quite new to using this.
Yeah,
I haven't really ever used this question often. More recently, I'm using it, and I started off by saying it how it is. I'd say, like, what is the trait that's lacking in animals that justifies doing that to them, but not humans. But then you can just simplify it even further. It's just like, you're essentially just asking the question is like, what is the difference between us and the animals that you pay to be exploited and killed that justifies doing that to them, but not us? I
yeah,
think that's just a very simple question. It's the same could be said of when, you know, uh, racism was like super prevalent. It's just like, well, what is the difference between, like, what's the justifiable difference between us and them that allows you to have prejudice against them, but not us? Like, why do you treat them differently? Oh, it's because their skin color. Okay,
yeah,
well, is that really a significant trait? So, like, so you can go deeper into that. It's like, well, then apply that to a white person. Let's just say there was a white person that had a genetic disease that over time made their skin go black, dark skin. Would you then now discriminate them? Well, then I
yeah,
guess it's not the skin color. Then it's and then you keeps going further and further until you realize that actually there is no justifiable difference. The only thing that matters is that they're sentient and we're sentient. So that's the reason we don't exploit humans, is because there's somebody having a subjective experience that feels pleasure and pain just like them. So fundamentally, there is no good excuse to be doing it to them, but not us. So yeah, it's just kind of like you just got to word it in a way that meets that person. They might not understand it the first time, and you can just reword it again because it's just a very simple question. Name the trait.
Have you had any failures with it? Like any dead ends? I feel like sometimes with some people you do get dead ends with name the trait, whereas they're
Yes.
like they just can't get away from the idea that, well, they're animals, we're humans. That's
I
not a
know.
trait. What are you talking about?
Oh
Like, have you
yeah,
had
man.
that happen?
That's why I'm saying that I'm actually still new to it, because so many times I do get those dead ends, and
Yeah.
especially if you word it in a certain way. So yeah, a common one is, oh well, this was just a recent one. Oh well, because they're food and we're not, and you just say, well, that first of all, that's not a trait actually. I mean, like, well, it's a trait that we give them, but no, yes, sure, but humans can be food too. But I'm just trying to understand. Well, then you can ask that question further. It's like, why are they food but not humans? Humans could be food, but you say that they're not food. So why are they food? Well,
Interesting. I never
because
thought about it
yeah,
that way.
I don't, and I wish I actually had a conversation where I wish I just said it like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't remember. I have to watch it back. But there's always a way to dive a little bit deeper when you get stuck in these ruts. So it's like, and I remember being stuck in a rut with this butcher that I debated on my Instagram live stream, and he kept saying, well, because it's illegal. In hindsight, you just say, well, why? Oh, sorry, I was asking, what would it be okay to do this to humans? He said, no, because it's illegal. Well, first of all, that's not a trait, but you can just ask, well, why is it illegal? Well, because it's wrong to harm somebody else. And it's such a simple thing that I wish I had just said in hindsight. But there's always a way to go a little bit deeper, because fundamentally you're trying to get to the answer that the reason you wouldn't do it to a human is because they feel pain and suffer, they're sentient.
Yeah.
You kind of, I think that that's really important. If you can get it out of them, this is something I want to be doing more often now, that understand why they don't do it to humans. Really get to the point that it's because they're sentient. You know, they might not understand what sentient is, but really you want to get it out of them. The reason you don't do this to humans is because there's somebody that is suffering there, and someone that wants to live, that has a preference to survive. And then you just apply that to animals. But then, yes, you're going to get all the excuses. But I think that's really important.
That's an interesting point. Like, well, as you said it now, I think I just tried to make a sign that says, why is it bad to hurt humans? And then just
Yes,
talk
that's what
about
I want to
this
do too.
and then bring up animals. That's an interesting person. I didn't think about it to do it like
Yes.
that.
Well, because if we were to play that out a little bit, it's like, so what would happen is, it's like, ideally you get them to agree it's because they're sentient, they have a preference to survive, and they have a preference to avoid pain.
Yeah.
So it's not because as humans are intelligent. It's not because we're morally superior. They've already agreed it's because we're sentient, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we bring up animals, then they might just have the monkey brain that says, "Oh, it's because we're more intelligent." That's a contradiction. You said it's because we have sentience. So that's a contradiction. If you say anything else at this point, you're contradicting yourself, because then if there's more intelligent humans and less intelligent humans, you would justify doing it to them. So immediately, they've already agreed to it, so you can just point out that's a contradiction immediately.
Yeah, exactly. That's well, I'm excited about this one. I'm excited.
It's a good one, I think.
How much time do you have left, by the way? Because I think we're reaching the 2-hour mark.
Oh, look, if you, I don't really mind. I mean, yes, any point from this on, I don't know. Let's just say another 10, 15 minutes if you got a few more questions there. Awesome.
Love it. I wanted to ask you also about intersectionality. One of those things. How do you
Yep.
How do you feel about intersectionality and veganism? Do you think it's good to bring up intersectionality with people? Do you yourself think that, let's say, I don't know, somebody who's a racist, do you think a racist could be vegan? What's your take on
that? I would say technically, I haven't thought about this a lot, because it doesn't, I don't know, it hasn't been a topic that's come up for me personally a lot, and not something that someone's questioned me on too much. I'm in two minds about it, as I'm sure probably a lot of people are. It's kind of like, yes, technically you can not exploit animals, and and then but also discriminate against humans, and yes, that's a
Yeah.
contradiction. So essentially, I would just come back to it as like, if intersectionality is just trying to be logically consistent. It's like, I think veganism applies to all sentient beings, humans included. So I would just say, technically, it's kind of like, it's just a logical inconsistency to not discriminate against animals if you want to be vegan, but then discriminate against humans irrationally. And I'll just point that out. It's just like, well, then you're kind of going against the values of veganism. But I wouldn't stop somebody. I mean, like, if someone just chooses to not discriminate animals, but then they discriminate humans, well, then you're just kind of doing the reverse activism. It's like, okay, well, you just have an issue with humans, so I'm going to advocate for humans to you. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, man. It just seems, it seems logical to me, and you just approach it like every other type of topic. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I completely agree with you. One of my best friends actually came to Amsterdam last week, and the one thing that resonated with her, and she became vegan, the one thing that resonated with her was the idea of discrimination, that she does not want to discriminate against anybody, animals
Yeah,
or humans, right? And
yeah,
um, a lot of people, obviously, I feel like if you're a person who understands that veganism is a movement against discrimination, you're kind of like, okay, well, how could I discriminate against the people and stuff? So in a sense, I think intersectionality exists. Like, I don't think a vegan person can ever discriminate against somebody else unless they somehow are not, or are vegan but are not, as you also put it before, and as I agree with you, that maybe they're not at that stage where they see veganism as animal rights, but rather as reducing harm, or as, I don't know, something
yes,
along those lines, right? So maybe
that's
in that
right.
case, yeah.
Yes, I think,
But I
yeah,
don't.
if someone, and this is why I always try to clarify that veganism is not just about suffering, like, and just about harm, because you can go down that rabbit hole and end
Yeah,
up at the conclusion that you can actually still kill animals if you did it in a way that's completely harmless, and you can
yeah,
kill humans technically then if it's completely harmless and they didn't know it and no one suffers because of it. That's why suffering isn't good enough for me, because going on to intersectionality is, as long as you're reducing harm to animals and reducing suffering to animals, well, then I can still discriminate other humans, because that's not veganism. Well, no, veganism is actually about exploitation. I guess you could also say discrimination based on species, or but I'm kind of now leaning towards veganism being about a way of living that doesn't violate animal rights, um, as an extension of human rights. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you can be for animal rights but then not also be for human rights, because that just wouldn't be logically consistent, and therefore it wouldn't make sense to discriminate humans but then not discriminate animals. It's just like literally the reverse of veganism in a way, isn't it? So
yeah,
it just seems obvious to me, really.
yeah. I agree with you. It would be a bit absurd to be one and
Yeah,
not the other.
that's right.
Okay. I have a couple more questions. I wanted to also
Yeah,
ask you,
awesome.
what do you do outside of outreach? Like, do you, well, not just hobbies, that would be interesting, but like, I'm curious, is there any other way that you prepare that make your outreaches any like better? Like, I don't know, I speak in the mirror sometimes. I
Yeah.
write down when I see a really good reply from somebody, including yourself, Earthling Ed. I always write it down, and I'm like, just read it a couple of times out loud, just so that I can memorize it, or memorize the idea, or oh, I just, you just lost my camera, but I'm still here. So do you have
Okay, that's
any
all good.
yeah, do you have any such
Yeah.
do you do any sort anything like that to
Yes. Well, I would say I've been very, very lucky to be in a relationship with Tash, because I've learned so much from her and the way she thinks. It's like animal rights has come and veganism has come so naturally to her, and like the logic that follows it, because as you go vegan and as you become an activist, you don't just know it instantaneously for a lot of the time. It's like you pick up on things that you're doing that are inherently speciesist, over time. The way you think about the world and animals that you might not have realized is kind of against the ethics of veganism. And so I've been very lucky to be able to always learn from her and ask her questions, and vice versa. We just converse a lot of the time, which I think is really important. I just think we need to talk about our thoughts and our ideas and our opinions on certain topics around veganism and carnism, whatever. Just talking about arguments against veganism, just with other people. Flesh out the idea, your thoughts, debate. Just kind of generally, just debate other vegans, and just with your questions. That's a really great way to learn, and when you're not actually doing outreach, that's a great preparation. But then, yeah, I think outside of that, when you're actually trying to think of ideas and how you want to approach conversations, it's like, yeah, you just need to find the time to just jot down ideas, how conversations should flow. Like, it's like just general learning. So, if I have an idea, it's just kind of like, well, how can I make that an interesting idea? How can I make that video entertaining to watch? Just general stuff like that, man. But typically, I don't really, outside of that, I don't overthink things too much, although I am very critical of myself and my videos and watching it back. Generally, you just it's an intuitive process. You get out there and you just do it a little bit differently every time. And outside of that, ideally, you rest your brain. You give yourself feedback. You seek feedback from other people, and you go out and you do it again. That's kind of like the general process I follow.
That's a very good one. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what everybody should do at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're rapidly approaching the end of the stream, so that's good. Well, that's good.
Cool.
It's nice. I've been enjoying.
It's been a good conversation.
It has. I mean, I still have some other questions, but I want to, calm it down more and more.
Sure.
So I want to ask you: do you have any? Since we started talking about that, do you have any hobbies that you like doing? What is it that you like to do in your free time? Maybe that isn't vegan activism necessarily. I feel like as vegan activists, we sometimes are so consumed with vegan activism, and I personally enjoy it a lot, and I'm sure you do too. But it's also good sometimes to have other hobbies, just to have our mind change.
Absolutely,
change up a bit.
It's very important. It's very important to have a life outside of it. I don't have a day job. Tash and I have been very lucky that way. But then again, that leaves you kind of just sitting around a lot of the time, because you can't always just do activism. Like I said, editing is a lot of it. But technically, we could be out on the street every single day. But I don't know. I feel like you'd burn out if like me personally, I would just kind of get a bit bored. You'd have the same conversations over and over. So it is important to have those breaks where you look at that set of activism you did those few days, and you're like, okay, I want to do something differently now. But sometimes it takes time to create that change. So hobbies come into it. You need to get your mind out of it. For me, I walk in nature a lot. I'm very lucky to be right next to a really nice lake park. So I'm there every day. I just enjoy that. I feel like I go without a phone or out anything, just my thoughts. And even though I don't know if that's really a hobby, but to me it is. I just love doing that. But I get very interested in various things. Like now it's cars. I don't know. I just recently just I don't. It's not even something that I've ever been that interested in. But I'm buying a new car. So I've just been getting. So I never thought I would have, but I'm just always watching videos on that now. That's the main thing I'm watching videos on, and not Top Gear, the new one, the Grand Tour, and just watching it, I was I love this. So it's just I'm always getting different things that I'm interested in. I play music as well. I play guitar, and I've been in a band. I haven't played with them since last year, but that's another great thing, playing piano and stuff like that. What else? I love going to the gym. I do that every day, and most days anyway, and that's a really great way to just focus on other goals, just personal goals, personal health. And yeah, so it's quite. I'm very simple, and obviously TV and art and stuff like that. I love movies and stuff like that. So it's all the obvious stuff, really.
Oh, it's not
But
that obvious. I didn't know you played in a band, and I wouldn't call it simple necessarily. You said you played the piano. You also played the guitar and the piano?
I'm very novice at piano, but I'm learning and getting better at it. But just that's just all I mean. Like really, just kind of having something else to put your mind to,
Exactly.
just to get your mind off this stuff. Like activism is the thing that consumes my mind the most.
Yeah.
But you can't do it all the time. Like you need to have your mind. This goes for all forms of work, right? Like you have to have pleasure and play. Work and pleasure, because I just don't think you'd be as effective otherwise. That's
No,
my
yeah.
personal opinion. I know people that are literally. I know activists like I've personally got to meet like Joey, and I don't know if he has many hobbies outside of activism. I feel like he is so fully in it, and it's so admirable to see these people that are like 24/7. That is where their mind is at. Like I want to get to a point where I actually want to be more and more consistent and active. Like, but for me, I just kind of trust my intuition, and if I don't want to do it today, I won't, and I'll do something else. I have to kind of trust that personally. Each person's different, right?
Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think we're very similar in that way. I also, well, I did the piano. I got rid of it because my house is small and I couldn't fit the piano
Yeah,
and everything else in it. But I'm practicing the guitar still, and I'm
awesome.
constantly trying to find games to play or to put myself in a situation where I just like have to not think about vegan activism, because it's just
Absolutely.
so easy to fall down that rabbit hole and be like, well, it's still a vegan expression, I guess, but it's easy to fall down that hole where you're like,
Yes.
oh, I like doing this, I enjoy it. But then when you, because I feel like if I do it alone, I like listening to videos, I like learning stuff about it, but then you don't feel the burnout when you're doing that. You feel the burnout when you're going out on the street and talking to the people, and that's the worst part
Yes.
about it, is it? Right? So it's,
Absolutely.
you need breaks, so
You do,
nice.
yeah. Yeah, there's so many ways that we can do it. It's just literally finding, yeah, you got to just turn your mind off to it to a degree. I don't think you can ever, if this is something you're very passionate about, I don't think there's ever a moment of the day where it's not on your mind,
Yeah,
especially if you're in social media, because it's literally always there at your fingertips. Which I don't know if is a healthy thing. Like, I really want to create even more stricter boundaries
yeah.
between activism and vegan related stuff and literally not. Like, I want to be able to turn off to a degree. It's just sometimes it's very hard not to. So I'm even trying to get better at that, to be honest.
Do you find yourself opening up the YouTube Studio or Instagram app and just refreshing and seeing, looking at the
Yes.
numbers or stuff?
Oh, it's so
Especially,
unhealthy, man. Like, oh, especially if, like I said, like I'm so self-critical. Like the numbers, like you evaluate your worth off these numbers sometimes, and it is not good. It is not a good thing to do, and they're designed to make you do that. Like it is not a healthy thing. So that's a constant struggle as well, and I'm trying to get better at that. Is that the same for you?
yeah, because so people who maybe haven't done YouTube and are listening, who don't know, on YouTube, when you post a video, they, aside from views or whatever, they tell you the performance of the video, kind of like a ranking of, out of all your videos, what ranking it is, and they measure it basically at that point in time, after an hour that it's been posted, how many
Yeah.
views it got and how many other views other videos have got. And so you can kind of see, like, if you post a video and you see that the ranking is like number 5, number 6, you're like, oh shit, what's not working
I
with this
know.
video?
And then you
And
go
then
to
you're
change
like,
the title maybe, and then that might
exactly.
may or may not work, and then it's just like, what the hell? And I've had some videos that like it's so random. Like, so some of my shorts have been very successful, and then I kind of have an average number, and that changes too. And then some will just do like a complete dud, and it makes you wonder: is it being censored? But it's not limited. Like some that won't even reach. Like for me, like it might not even reach. It might just reach 1,000 views on a short, and it's like everything else is getting multiple thousands, and it's like, what the hell is it with this one? Like, I can't understand it. And then it plays on your mind. It's like, what's wrong with this one? What have I done with it? Or is this,
Exactly.
it really
Yeah.
messes with you sometimes. It's not a good hole to go down.
No, and you never know, like, what is it that I like? Why is that? Like, it's so
I
like,
know.
at least to me, sometimes it feels like it's insane. Why is it that this one's working, this one's not working? Is it? It's just,
I
it's
wish there was a formula, but what I've learned is just you can't completely control it. The only thing you can control is this a good video? Like, I know that is such a
yeah,
subjective thing to say, but like when you watch it, are you genuinely entertained by this? Are you genuinely engaged by it? Is this something that you feel confident in? Like
yeah,
this is what I wanted to make. Um, and whether it performs well or not, it, that's out of your control. Whether the numbers suit what you think it was, that's still feedback. It's still important feedback. If you're consistently getting a low ranking, low percentage, you're not doing something right, and you need
yeah.
to learn. But the most important thing is, like, when I watch this video, is there, was this an engaging video? Was this a worthwhile video for somebody to watch? I think really that's all we have to do, and the numbers either reflect that or not.
That's a very good point. I like that. That's a very nice way of putting it. I have a couple of questions that I all ask everybody who I interview usually, and yeah, let's go to them. They're pretty quick.
Yeah, let's
So,
do it.
what is the argument against veganism that you dislike the most?
Um, I don't want to just say the most mainstream thing, which is crop death.
Oh,
But
okay, interesting. Yeah.
well, I kind of would go down that a little bit. Worst one, some of the worst. I'll just go with that then for now. The reason I say the crop death argument is because it's not just a simple response. It often requires a bit of explaining, an understanding of rights. Um, you kind of have to require a deeper level of explanation, whereas the other person that said they're very hard to convince sometimes otherwise. But I have got to a point now where I think I can get through that very quickly. But for a while, it was like, I know what I need to say, but I don't know how to get it across to you in a way that's going to be succinct and allows me to get back on track. So that one can be very frustrating at times, and people can make up so much misinformation. So when we debated this carnivore doctor, like Anthony Chafee, he
Oh,
just
I
kept
saw that
saying,
one.
"Oh, how do you justify murdering quadrillions of insects?" I'm like, where are you getting this quadrillions number? And no matter how much you explain it, they always have another spin on how, because it's such a defeatist argument. Like, if you're killing more animals, that goes against veganism. I'm killing less animals than you. I only eat 3 cows per year, whereas you kill thousands and thousands and thousands of animals per year. So that's against veganism. I'm morally superior than you. It's not that
Yeah.
simple. Like, it's so far from the truth, but it requires a bit of explanation. But to the average listener, it might be enough for them to be like, "Oh yeah, true. I'm against veganism. Then I'm more vegan than him." And it's so stupid.
That's like saying, okay, well, I don't drive. You drive, and driving kills a lot of people, so
That's
therefore I'm
right.
more moral than it. It's ridiculous, actually.
Exactly. It's
Okay,
a frustrating one.
and I agree that it's a frustrating one. And if you could, it's a slightly different question. If you could remove off the face of the earth one fallacy, one logical fallacy, nobody will ever commit it again, which one would you remove?
Nature fallacy. That is Yeah. Oh,
Me
it
too. Same.
it comes up so often. It's like, oh, but beyond any of the others that uh because lions do it. It's just it's so boring. It's so boring for vegans. Like, I'm so over seeing the nature fallacy come up, and my recent debate was just that through and through the entire thing, and it's just like, it should be so simple that nature is no guidance for well-being at all. It's just there's no moral principles associated with nature, but people use it to justify horrible actions to make themselves feel better. It's just a terrible, terrible excuse.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it's exactly the same. I feel like if the appeal to nature wouldn't exist, the world would be so much better. Not just for veganism, but for everything. It's kind of
Yeah,
ridiculous.
absolutely. I agree.
Okay. And if you could pick one, wait, before that, how do you envision a vegan world? Like, let's say you somehow have a time machine, travel into the future. It's the year 2100, whatever. Everybody's vegan. The whole world is vegan.
Mm.
What is the first thing that you would want to find out about, or you would want to see? Like, what is it that would make this world interesting to you that is vegan?
I wouldn't even say it's like it would be interesting. Obviously, it would be amazing, but I would say
Yeah,
it would be just as interesting as a society where there aren't human slavery. There isn't human slavery. I know there are societies where that is the case, but for us, we don't walk around and see humans in chains anymore. We don't see humans
yeah,
being, say, murdered. And it's just a normal thing. It's not
yeah.
interesting. It's just what it should be. So if
It's a
there was a
very nice
vegan world,
response.
I would just be walking through society feeling like, ah, this is normal. And there would be some other type of injustice going on, probably, maybe. Um, However, and there would still be animal abuse happening, just as there's still human abuse happening. So it wouldn't be perfect, and I don't think it will ever be perfect, but we could enforce it to a degree where it would be abolished, and it would just feel normal. That's all I could say, I reckon. It would be amazing. It'd be a beautiful, much better world, but yes, it would feel normal.
That's a very nice way of putting it. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you on that one. And the last question: if you could pick one person in the world to make a vegan, regardless if they're a public figure, they're a friend, their family, who would you pick?
Oh, um, oh God. One person to make vegan. Who would it be? Oh, geez, that's I don't know if I can even give you an answer to that because I can't. It would just be like it would have to be a very influential person that would speak out about it very often. Oh, that's a good one. Joe Rogan. Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah, I think that's a good example of somebody that was so far from it, like so
Yeah,
extreme from veganism that has a massive influence. That would be the person. Like, so Joe Rogan would be a fun one to pick. Yeah, absolutely. Something like that.
yeah. I also thought first Joe Rogan at some point, but then I realized, oh my god, I think Mr. Beast would be the best one. I think Mr. Beast would
Yeah,
be,
yeah, exactly. That's a great example.
yeah, he would be the absolute. If Mr. Beast goes vegan and he just speaks about it a little bit, I think
Oh,
it would
perfect.
be massive change.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
it would just have to be whoever has the most influence at any given point and can do a
yeah,
lot to help that issue. That yeah, and then that Mr. Beast, I would probably agree with you, and I'll just pick him.
yeah, yeah. That's I think like he has probably one of the highest influence nowadays in like
Oh, absolutely.
opinion, especially with young people, which is very important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with that.
Okay. Um, Thanks, Jack, for coming along.
Oh,
Um,
thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'd say you're a very good interviewer, but it's just very casual and calming to talk to you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's I'm a calm person in general. I get
Yeah,
agitated
I
very
feel
much,
that.
but I do.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
see that that does present itself in your activism too, which I think you're doing really, really well at as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's I can actually I wanted to ask you. Wait, I had one more thing that I wanted to ask you. Is it now that you're like, I mean, you have a lot of followers too, right? You and Tash has a lot of followers. Do you find yourself that you kind of have to be more politically correct or more? I mean, I think I'm by default politically correct, but sometimes I make dumb jokes. Everybody does. Like, do you find yourself that you kind of have to be in that position where you're kind of like representing vegan activism or representing veganism?
I personally don't see myself like that. I don't even see myself as being up there or influential in any way. Like I said, I feel like I only just started doing this. I just was filming Tash and I posted videos, and it's literally only since being January this year that my YouTube has got a lot of subscribers, a lot of views. But
Yeah,
even then, I don't think like that at all. I don't see myself as being up there in quotation marks.
you are.
It's
Come on, man. You're
but
not
that's the
that.
thing.
Yeah.
I don't see. I can't get see it like that. I don't know why. I feel like because there's so many activists that don't have, say, lots of attention, that are such good activists, and it feels wrong. And yes, numbers may say something, but um, there's always someone above you, and there's always someone less than you that's better or worse at what you do, and it's like, so
Hmm.
it's an interesting thing to, yeah, to put out there. But I'm, by like I said, the same as you, sorry, as I'm default politically correct. Obviously, I have a very dark, I it's not obvious, but I do have a very dark sense of humor. So when I'm with like Tash and my family, I'm so different to how people probably think of who I am. So uh, maybe if that slipped out one day, yes, there'd be certain things that people wouldn't be happy with. But what you say to friends and family jokingly is not your
Yeah.
actual views. So I think it's so different. But I'm not worried about that coming out or anything like that. Because even if it did, I don't care. I kind of like to be true and honest.
That's a good one. Yeah, I agree with you with that one. It's we all have like our I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's politically correctness, but we all have our dumb jokes, dumb thing that we like to joke about, and everybody can just
Yeah,
take that out of context and use it and say, "Oh, look at this! What this
absolutely.
person is saying." I was like, "What? No, they're not saying that. Come on, it's not that."
Yes,
So
I know.
yeah,
There's a lot of that too. Like I'm just not critical in that way, and I every person has things that they do that you disagree with, and there's things that you agree with. Like there's many vegans that I follow that are influential that I agree with pretty much all of the views, but a few.
yeah,
But I don't care, like, and I'm generally very forgiving of people too, and I think that people can better themselves um and adapt. That's literally what being an activist is about. We're
sure.
literally talking to people that we completely disagree with on this very important topic, knowing that they can come around. So
Yeah, I never thought about that perspective, but that is true. Yeah, indeed. I think activists and vegan activists should probably get along better because that's pretty much what we do every
yeah,
day. Never thought about it that way. That's
exactly.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you everybody for being here. Oh, I usually put this song at the end of. Oh yeah, that's nice.
Nice.
Okay.
Good song.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been awesome having you, Jack. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Same.
I want them. I like to have conversations with the vegan activists to try and get more vegans to be active in the community and do activism. Obviously, there's a lot of different forms of activism, but whatever kind of form you choose to do, I believe that it will be helpful. And you got to start somewhere. You're not going to start off being great at first. You're not going to start off. We all start off and we learn, we get better, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and yeah, if you go out there and
Well
speak,
said.
animals will thank you for it. Or they can't really speak, but we're doing it for them, right? So I feel like a lot of the times it's good to just get that courage and just go for it. And after all, I really like what you just said just now. We encourage people to change. We talk about people to want to change for the better. Then I think we should also see that within ourselves and encourage ourselves to be courageous enough to go out there and just do activism. And the more activists there are, the faster the vegan world becomes. So, and you can't say that one person, me being activist, won't change, because that's the whole thing about veganism. You have an impact, both as a person, as an activist. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Jack, for being here.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
I will end the stream now. Thank you, everybody who, I think 3 people have done some memberships. Thank you so much. And
Cool.
I will see everybody in the, I don't know, in the next stream or something. And oh yeah, subscribe to my channel. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to Jack channel. Damn it. Why do I?
Yeah, that's the right direction.
Jack's channel. If you're not subscribed yet, and I mean, it would be weird that you're subscribed to mine and not his, but subscribe to everybody. Just click on subscribe, like, put all that stuff, comment, and be active. Also, another form of activism is commenting on vegan videos, and I feel like go on Jack's videos and shoot him some compliments, because he does such great work, and there's all these asshole trolls. We just gotta,
yeah, there's a lot of them. So we need more of the vegan army out there.
Yeah, we need some vegan army out there. So if that's the form that you want to do activism, do that. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I will end the stream now, and I will see you next, maybe